Hey there, welcome back. Tonight, we're talking about something you've probably experienced more times than you can count. That sudden, inexplicable moment when your body decides you're in danger, except you're not. You're just sitting there. Maybe eating a sandwich, maybe scrolling through your phone, maybe just trying to fall asleep, and suddenly your heart races. Your palms sweat, your throat tightens. Your body is absolutely convinced something is trying to kill you. But here's the thing, it's wrong. Your body is an incredible survival machine, fine-tuned over millions of years to keep you alive. But sometimes, just sometimes, it gets a little overzealous. It sees threats that aren't there. It sounds alarms for harmless things. It treats everyday sensations like emergency situations. And tonight, we're going to explore exactly why that happens. Before we dive in, if you're finding this helpful, go ahead and give the video a like. Subscribe if you want more biology content to help you drift off. And drop a comment letting me know what time it is where you are right now and what your body has falsely panicked about recently. I always love hearing from you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, maybe adjust your pillow. Let's explore the 15 fascinating ways your body misreads the world and why you can relax, because you're perfectly safe. Let's start with something that happens right at the edge of consciousness. That moment when you're drifting off to sleep, your breathing slows, your muscles relax, and then suddenly you jerk awake with the overwhelming sensation that you're falling. Your heart pounds, your body tenses. For a split second, you're absolutely certain you are plummeting through space. But you're just lying in bed. You haven't moved. Nothing has changed except your brain's interpretation of reality. This phenomenon has a name. Scientists call it a hypnic jerk, or sometimes a hypnagogic jerk. It's one of the most common experiences in human sleep, affecting somewhere between 60 and 70% of people at some point in their lives. Some experience it occasionally, others feel it almost every single night. And despite how alarming it feels, it's completely, utterly harmless. So what's actually happening inside your body during these strange moments? The answer lies in the transition between wakefulness and sleep. One of the most complex neurological shifts your brain performs every single day. As you begin to fall asleep, your brain doesn't simply switch off like a light. Instead, it goes through a carefully orchestrated sequence of changes. Different brain regions start to quiet down. Your conscious awareness begins to fade, and crucially, your muscles start to relax. This muscle relaxation is called hypotonia, and it's essential for healthy sleep. Throughout the night, your body cycles through different sleep stages, and during REM sleep, the stage where most vivid dreaming occurs, your muscles become almost completely paralyzed. This paralysis protects you. It prevents you from physically acting out your dreams, from thrashing around or potentially hurting yourself while your mind wanders through imaginary landscapes. But here's where things get interesting. During that initial transition into sleep, as your muscles begin their first wave of relaxation, your brain is still partially alert. Different neural systems are essentially arguing about whether you're asleep or awake. The reticular activating system, which keeps you conscious and alert during the day, is starting to power down. Meanwhile, the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, your brain's sleep switch, is ramping up its activity. In this twilight state, your brain can misinterpret the signals it's receiving from your body. When your muscles suddenly relax, releasing the tension they've been holding all day, your brain might perceive this as a loss of control. And in the primitive logic of survival, a sudden loss of bodily control means one thing: you're falling. The evolutionary explanation for this is fascinating. Some researchers believe that hypnic jerks are ancient reflexes left over from our tree-dwelling ancestors. Millions of years ago, our primate predecessors slept in trees, balanced on branches high above the ground. Falling asleep in a tree is genuinely dangerous. If you lose your grip, you fall, and falling from a tree can be fatal. So the theory goes that our brains evolved a safety mechanism. If the brain detected a sudden loss of muscle tone that might indicate you're slipping from your perch, it would jolt you awake with a burst of activity. Your muscles would contract, your arms would reach out instinctively, you'd grab the branch and save yourself from a potentially deadly fall. Even though we haven't slept in trees for millennia, that ancient reflex remains buried deep in our neurological wiring. Of course, not all scientists agree with the tree sleeping hypothesis. Some argue that hypnic jerks might simply be a natural consequence of the way our nervous system transitions between states. When you shift from the active, alert mode of wakefulness to the passive, restorative mode of sleep, there's bound to be some turbulence. Think of it like changing gears in a car. There's a brief moment of mechanical adjustment, a slight jolt as one system disengages and another engages. What makes hypnic jerks more likely? Research has identified several triggers. Stress is a major one. When you're anxious or worried, your nervous system remains on high alert even as you try to sleep. This hypervigilance makes your brain more likely to misinterpret normal sensations as threats. Caffeine consumption, especially later in the day, can also increase the frequency of hypnic jerks. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors in your brain, and adenosine is one of the key chemicals that promotes sleep. When you interfere with this system, the transition into sleep becomes less smooth. Physical exhaustion paradoxically makes hypnic jerks more common. You might think that being extremely tired would make you fall asleep more easily, and in a sense, it does. But when your body is overtired, your muscles are often tense and overworked. When they finally release that tension as you drift off, the contrast is more dramatic. Your brain is more likely to notice the sudden change and react with alarm. Irregular sleep schedules also play a role. Your brain thrives on routine. It likes to know when sleep is coming. When you go to bed at wildly different times, or when you're sleep deprived and then suddenly try to catch up, your brain's sleep mechanisms can become disorganized. The transition into sleep becomes messier, more prone to these startling misfires. Sometimes hypnic jerks are accompanied by vivid sensory experiences. You might not just feel like you're falling. You might see a flash of light, hear a loud sound, or even experience a brief dream-like image. You might dream that you tripped on a curb, or that you missed a step on a staircase. Your brain, caught between waking and sleeping, weaves a quick narrative to explain the physical sensation. It's trying to make sense of the jolt, to create a coherent story from fragmented neural signals. The good news is that hypnic jerks, while startling, cause no harm whatsoever. They don't damage your brain. They don't prevent you from getting restful sleep. They don't indicate any underlying medical problem. They're simply a quirk of neurology, a brief moment when your brain's threat detection system gets a little overzealous. Most people who experience them simply roll over and fall back asleep within moments. If hypnic jerks are bothering you frequently, there are gentle ways to reduce them. Establishing a consistent sleep schedule helps your brain anticipate sleep more smoothly. Reducing caffeine intake, especially in the afternoon and evening, allows your natural sleep chemistry to function without interference. Creating a calming bedtime routine, something that signals to your brain that sleep is approaching, can ease the transition. And managing stress through deep breathing, meditation, or simply taking time to wind down before bed can quiet that overactive threat detection system. The irony is that worrying about hypnic jerks can actually make them worse. If you lie in bed anxiously waiting for that jolt, your nervous system remains on edge. You're essentially priming your brain to stay alert, which is exactly the opposite of what you need for smooth sleep onset. The best approach is to acknowledge them when they happen, remind yourself they're harmless, and let yourself drift back towards sleep without resistance. So the next time you're falling asleep and suddenly jerk awake with the sensation of falling, you'll know exactly what's happening. Your brain, ever vigilant, ever protective, is simply checking one more time to make sure you're safe. It's a false alarm from an ancient system that once kept your ancestors alive in the trees. And now, in your comfortable bed, far from any real danger, it's just a small reminder of how deeply your survival instincts run. You're not falling, you're just falling asleep, and that's exactly where you're supposed to be. A single speck of dust drifts into your nose. It's microscopic, weightless, completely harmless. And yet, within milliseconds, your body launches one of the most violent reflexes in human physiology. Your chest expands, your face contorts, every muscle from your abdomen to your throat tenses simultaneously, and then you explode. Air rockets out of your nose and mouth at speeds approaching 100 miles per hour. Your eyes slam shut. Your entire body convulses, all because of one tiny particle that posed absolutely no threat to your survival. Welcome to the sneeze, one of your body's most dramatic overreactions to the mundane irritations of daily life. Sneezing feels violent because it is violent. It's a coordinated muscular explosion designed to expel foreign material from your nasal passages with maximum force. But here's the thing. Most of the time, that foreign material is utterly harmless. A bit of dust, a strand of pet hair, a grain of pollen. Your body doesn't care. It treats every intrusion as a potential biological threat and responds with overwhelming force. The sneeze reflex begins in the lining of your nasal passages. This lining is covered with specialized cells that have tiny hair-like projections called cilia. These cilia wave back and forth constantly, moving mucus and trapped particles toward the back of your throat, where you swallow them without even noticing. It's a quiet, efficient cleaning system that works around the clock. But beneath this layer of ciliated cells lies a dense network of nerve endings, and these nerves are remarkably sensitive. When a particle enters your nose and touches these nerve endings, they send an immediate signal to your brain. Specifically, the signal travels along the trigeminal nerve, one of the largest nerves in your head. The trigeminal nerve is responsible for sensation in your face, and it has 3 main branches that spread across your forehead, cheeks, and jaw. The branch that innervates your nasal passages is constantly monitoring for potential threats. This signal reaches a cluster of neurons in your brainstem called the sneeze center. Yes, you have a dedicated sneeze center in your brain. It's located in the lateral medulla, a region that controls many involuntary reflexes. When the sneeze center receives the signal that something has irritated your nasal passages, it immediately coordinates a complex sequence of muscular contractions designed to expel the intruder. First, you take a deep breath. Your diaphragm contracts sharply, pulling air deep into your lungs. At the same time, the muscles between your ribs, called intercostal muscles, expand your chest cavity even further. You're loading up with as much air as possible, preparing for the explosion. This inhalation happens quickly, often catching you off guard. You might be mid-sentence when the urge hits, and suddenly you're gasping in air, unable to continue speaking. Next, your soft palate and uvula, that little teardrop-shaped piece of tissue hanging at the back of your throat, lift up to close off the passage between your nose and throat. Simultaneously, your tongue presses against the roof of your mouth. These movements create a sealed chamber, trapping the air you just inhaled in your lungs and building pressure. Meanwhile, your vocal cords snap together, further sealing the airway. The pressure in your chest continues to rise. Then comes the release. Your abdominal muscles contract forcefully, pushing your diaphragm upward. Your intercostal muscles squeeze your ribcage. Every muscle involved in breathing suddenly works in reverse, compressing your lungs with tremendous force. And then your soft palate drops, your vocal cords open, and all that compressed air explodes outward through your nose and mouth. The speed is astonishing. Studies using high-speed cameras have measured sneeze velocities of up to 100 miles per hour. Some research suggests that under certain conditions, particularly forceful sneezes might approach even higher speeds. This explosive burst of air carries with it mucus, saliva, and whatever particles triggered the sneeze in the first place. If you're sick, it also carries thousands or even millions of viral or bacterial particles, which is why sneezing is such an efficient method of spreading illness. But here's what makes sneezing feel so dramatic. It's not just the speed, it's the fact that you cannot control it. Once the sneeze reflex is triggered, it's going to happen. You can sometimes delay it slightly by pressing on your upper lip or pinching your nose, which can temporarily interrupt the signals, but eventually, the sneeze will break through. Your conscious mind has almost no say in the matter. This involuntary nature makes sneezing feel like your body has been hijacked, taken over by an ancient reflex that cares nothing for your plans or preferences. And then there's the eye-closing phenomenon. It's essentially impossible to sneeze with your eyes open. This happens because the same nerve pathways that trigger the sneeze also send signals to the muscles around your eyes, causing your eyelids to contract. There's an old myth that if you sneeze with your eyes open, your eyeballs will pop out. This is completely false. Your eyes are held securely in their sockets by muscles, tendons, and connective tissue. The pressure from a sneeze, while significant, is nowhere near enough to dislodge them. So why do we close our eyes? The most likely explanation is simply that it's part of the coordinated protective response. When your body detects an irritant and launches a violent expulsion reflex, closing your eyes protects them from any particles that might be flying around. It's a precaution, an extra layer of defense that gets bundled into the overall sneeze program. There's another persistent myth about sneezing. Some people believe that your heart stops when you sneeze. This isn't quite accurate. What actually happens is that the dramatic change in pressure inside your chest can briefly affect your heart rhythm. When you build up pressure before the sneeze, you're performing something similar to the Valsalva maneuver, which temporarily reduces blood flow back to your heart. This can cause a slight irregularity in your heartbeat, perhaps a skipped beat or a brief flutter. But your heart doesn't stop. It keeps beating throughout the entire sneeze, adjusting to the pressure changes but never actually pausing. What triggers sneezes? The list is surprisingly long and sometimes bizarre. Obviously, irritants like dust, pollen, smoke, and strong perfumes can trigger the reflex. These particles physically stimulate the nerve endings in your nose, setting off the sneeze center. But sneezes can also be triggered by things that don't involve any particles at all. Bright light, for example, causes some people to sneeze. This is called photic sneeze reflex, or the rather charming acronym ACHU, which stands for autosomal dominant compelling helio-ophthalmic outburst. Between 18 and 35% of people have this reflex. If you're one of them, stepping from a dark room into bright sunlight can trigger a sneeze within seconds. The mechanism isn't completely understood, but the leading theory involves crossed wires in your nervous system. The optic nerve, which carries signals from your eyes to your brain, runs very close to the trigeminal nerve. When bright light suddenly stimulates your optic nerve, some of that signal might spill over and accidentally activate the nearby trigeminal nerve, which then triggers a sneeze even though nothing actually entered your nose. Cold air can also trigger sneezing. The sudden temperature change in your nasal passages can irritate the sensitive nerve endings, prompting a sneeze. Similarly, suddenly breathing in very dry air or very humid air can cause the same response. Your nose is adapted to a certain range of temperature and humidity, and when conditions shift dramatically, your nervous system sometimes interprets this as an irritant. Some people sneeze when they pluck their eyebrows, others sneeze after eating a large meal, a phenomenon called snatiation, a portmanteau of sneeze and satiation. The nerve pathways involved in feeling full, apparently, can cross-activate the sneeze reflex in certain people. And then there are people who sneeze when they think about sex or experience arousal, another example of seemingly unrelated neural circuits influencing each other. Despite its violence, sneezing is almost always harmless. Yes, it's possible to injure yourself sneezing if you do it while your body is in an awkward position or if you try to suppress it too forcefully. There are rare reports of people fracturing ribs, herniating discs, or rupturing blood vessels in their eyes from particularly forceful sneezes or from suppressing sneezes when the pressure has already built up. But these cases are exceedingly uncommon. For the vast majority of sneezes, the worst consequence is a moment of mild embarrassment or the need to grab a tissue. Culturally, sneezing has accumulated an unusual amount of superstition and social ritual. In many cultures, people say "bless you" or "Gesundheit" after someone sneezes. These customs likely originated from ancient beliefs that sneezing expelled evil spirits or that your soul briefly left your body during a sneeze, requiring a blessing to ensure it returned safely. In some traditions, sneezing was seen as a good omen. In others, it was a sign of impending illness. None of these beliefs have any basis in biology, but they persist, woven into our social fabric. The truth is much simpler. Sneezing is your body's overzealous attempt to protect your respiratory system from anything it perceives as a threat. A grain of pollen, harmless to most people, triggers an explosive response. A bit of pepper, posing no danger whatsoever, causes your entire torso to convulse. Your body doesn't take chances. It doesn't carefully evaluate whether the irritant is actually dangerous. It simply detects something that shouldn't be there and launches a full-scale eviction. So the next time you feel that telltale tickle in your nose, that rising pressure in your chest, and that unstoppable urge to sneeze, remember that your body is about to unleash a hurricane over a speck of dust. It's dramatic, it's excessive, and it's completely, utterly harmless. But while sneezes feel dramatic on the outside, there's something happening inside your chest that can feel even more alarming. Something that makes you wonder, just for a moment, if your heart forgot how to beat. You're lying in bed, finally relaxed, your breathing slow and steady, your mind drifting towards sleep, and then you feel it. A flutter, a skip, a sensation like your heart just stumbled over its own rhythm. For a fraction of a second, it feels like your heart stopped completely. Then it pounds back into action, harder than before, as if making up for lost time. Your eyes snap open, your hand moves instinctively to your chest, and suddenly you're wide awake, wondering if something is seriously wrong. This sensation, this disturbing feeling of your heart misfiring, is one of the most common and most anxiety-inducing experiences in human physiology. It's called a premature ventricular contraction, or PVC for short. Sometimes it's a premature atrial contraction, a PAC. The names are different, but the experience is similar. Your heart's normal rhythm gets interrupted by an extra beat that comes too early, followed by a pause, and then a stronger than normal beat that makes your chest feel like it's thumping against your ribcage. The good news, and this is important to hear, is that these skipped beats are almost always completely benign. They happen to nearly everyone. Most people experience them occasionally and never even notice. But for some people, especially when they're lying quietly in bed trying to fall asleep, these irregular heartbeats become impossible to ignore. And once you notice them, it's hard to think about anything else. To understand what's happening during a PVC or PAC, you need to understand how your heart normally beats. Your heart is essentially a sophisticated electrical pump. It has 4 chambers, 2 atria on top and 2 ventricles on the bottom. With each heartbeat, the chambers contract in a precise sequence, pushing blood through your body in a coordinated wave. This coordination is controlled by your heart's electrical system. At the top of your right atrium sits a small cluster of specialized cells called the sinoatrial node, or SA node. This is your heart's natural pacemaker. The SA node generates electrical impulses spontaneously, usually between 60 and 100 times per minute when you're at rest. Each impulse spreads across both atria, causing them to contract and push blood down into the ventricles. The electrical signal then travels to another cluster of cells called the atrioventricular node, or AV node, which sits between the atria and ventricles. The AV node acts like a gatekeeper. It delays the signal slightly, giving the ventricles time to fill with blood from the atria. Then it allows the signal to pass through, spreading down specialized electrical pathways called the bundle of His and the Purkinje fibers. These pathways carry the signal rapidly throughout both ventricles, causing them to contract powerfully and pump blood out to your lungs and the rest of your body. This entire sequence happens in less than a second, and it repeats rhythmically, constantly, usually without you ever being aware of it. But occasionally, something goes slightly wrong. A cluster of cells somewhere in your heart, either in the atria or the ventricles, becomes irritable and fires an electrical impulse on its own. Outside the normal rhythm set by the SA node, this rogue signal causes an extra contraction, a premature beat that happens before the heart was supposed to beat again. When this early beat comes from the ventricles, it's called a PVC. When it comes from the atria, it's a PAC. Here's what makes this feel so strange. The premature beat happens too early, before your heart has had time to fill properly with blood. So, even though your heart contracts, it doesn't pump very much blood. You might not feel this early beat at all, or you might feel it as a weak flutter. What you definitely feel is what comes next. After the premature beat, your heart pauses. This pause is called a compensatory pause, and it happens because your heart's electrical system needs a moment to reset itself. During this pause, your heart has extra time to fill with blood. More blood flows into the ventricles than usual. So when the next normal beat finally arrives, your heart is fuller than it typically would be. and it contracts more forcefully. This powerful beat is what you feel most acutely. It's the thump, the pound, the sensation that your heart is suddenly beating much harder than it should. Your chest might feel like it jumped. You might feel a wave of adrenaline, and if you weren't anxious before, you probably are now. Why do these premature beats happen? The list of triggers is long and surprisingly mundane. Caffeine is one of the most common culprits. Coffee, tea, energy drinks, even chocolate, all contain stimulants that can make the cells in your heart more excitable. When these cells become overly sensitive, they're more likely to fire off those rogue electrical impulses. If you've ever noticed your heart skipping beats on a day when you've had more coffee than usual, this is why. Stress and anxiety are major triggers as well. When you're stressed, your body releases adrenaline and other stress hormones. These hormones increase your heart rate and make your heart's electrical system more reactive. The same mechanisms that prepare your body for fight or flight can also make your heart more prone to these extra beats. And here's the cruel irony. Worrying about the skipped beats creates more stress, which releases more adrenaline, which causes more skipped beats. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. Fatigue plays a role too. When you're exhausted, your body's systems don't function as smoothly as they should. Your heart's electrical coordination can become less precise. You're tired, your body is trying to wind down, but your heart's electrical system is a bit disorganized from the stress of the day. Electrolyte imbalances can trigger premature beats as well. Your heart's electrical system depends on precise concentrations of minerals like potassium, magnesium, and calcium. These electrolytes help generate and conduct electrical signals. If your levels are off, perhaps from dehydration, excessive sweating, or certain medications, your heart's rhythm can become less stable. Low magnesium, in particular, is associated with increased PVCs. Alcohol is another common trigger. Even moderate drinking can irritate your heart's electrical system. Heavy drinking can cause significant rhythm disturbances. And nicotine, whether from cigarettes or vaping, is a powerful stimulant that makes premature beats more likely. Essentially, anything that stimulates your nervous system or alters your body's chemistry can potentially trigger these extra heartbeats. For the vast majority of people, PVCs and packs are nothing more than a nuisance. Studies have shown that even perfectly healthy people with no heart disease can have hundreds or even thousands of PVCs per day. Most never notice them. The ones that get noticed are usually the ones that happen when you're quiet and still, like when you're lying in bed at night. During the day, when you're active and distracted, your brain filters them out. But at night, in the silence and stillness, every irregularity in your heartbeat becomes amplified. The sensation can be genuinely frightening. Your heart is supposed to beat steadily, reliably, constantly. When it doesn't, when it skips and stutters and pounds unexpectedly, it triggers a primal fear. Your heart is keeping you alive. Any sign that it's not working properly feels like a threat to your existence. This fear is understandable, but in the case of isolated PVCs and packs, it's almost always misplaced. Medical research has repeatedly shown that in people without underlying heart disease, these extra beats don't increase your risk of serious problems. They don't lead to heart attacks, they don't cause sudden cardiac death, they don't damage your heart. They're essentially electrical hiccups, brief moments when your heart's coordination gets slightly off track before immediately correcting itself. Your heart is incredibly resilient. It can handle these minor glitches without any long-term consequences. That said, there are situations where premature beats warrant medical attention. If you're experiencing very frequent PVCs, if they're accompanied by dizziness, fainting, or chest pain, or if you have known heart disease, you should definitely talk to a doctor. Continuous monitoring or other tests can help determine whether your premature beats are the benign variety or whether they're a sign of something that needs treatment. But for most people, the answer is reassuring. Your heart is fine. It's just being a little dramatic. If you're bothered by frequent PVCs, there are ways to reduce them. Cutting back on caffeine often helps significantly. Managing stress through relaxation techniques, exercise, or therapy can reduce the frequency of episodes. Making sure you're well hydrated and getting enough electrolytes, particularly magnesium and potassium, can stabilize your heart's electrical system. And improving your sleep, which admittedly can be difficult when your heart is keeping you awake, often helps break the cycle. The most important thing to understand is that noticing these skipped beats doesn't mean something is wrong. It often just means you're paying attention. Your heart has probably been having these occasional extra beats your entire life. You're just noticing them now. And the more you focus on them, the more aware of them you become, the larger they loom in your consciousness. This is called hypervigilance, and it can turn a minor physical sensation into a major source of anxiety. So the next time you're lying in bed and you feel that flutter, that skip, that unexpected thump in your chest, take a slow breath and remind yourself what's actually happening. One small cluster of cells in your heart fired an impulse a fraction of a second too early. Your heart paused briefly, filled a little more than usual, and then beat more forcefully to compensate. That's all. It's not a malfunction, it's not dangerous, it's just your heart, being slightly imperfect like everything else in your body. And while your heart occasionally skips a beat, you can feel there's something else your body does that you might hear but can't control. A sound that exists only inside your head. The room is completely silent. No traffic outside, no appliances humming, no voices in the distance, just pure, undisturbed quiet. And yet, you hear a sound. A high-pitched ringing, or maybe a hissing, or a low buzz, or a sound that's impossible to describe but unmistakably there. You turn your head, listening for the source. But the sound doesn't come from any direction. It comes from inside. It's always there, constant and maddening, a noise that exists only for you. Welcome to tinnitus, the sound of your brain inventing noise where none exists. Tinnitus affects somewhere between 15 and 20% of adults. For some, it's occasional and mild, barely noticeable except in very quiet moments. For others, it's constant and intrusive, a relentless soundtrack that never stops. The sound varies from person to person. Some describe it as ringing, like a telephone that never gets answered. Others hear buzzing, humming, clicking, whistling, or a sound like static from an old television. And the cruel irony is that the quieter your environment, the louder the phantom sound seems to become. So, what exactly is tinnitus? It's not a disease, it's a symptom, a perception of sound when no external sound is present. And that perception originates not in your ears, but in your brain. To understand why your brain would create phantom noise, you need to understand how hearing actually works and what happens when that system gets disrupted. Sound begins as vibrations in the air. These vibrations enter your ear canal and strike your eardrum, causing it to vibrate. These vibrations then travel through 3 tiny bones in your middle ear, the malleus, incus, and stapes, collectively called the ossicles. These bones amplify the vibrations and transmit them to your inner ear, specifically to a spiral-shaped structure called the cochlea. Inside the cochlea, which is about the size of a pea and shaped like a snail shell, is a fluid-filled chamber lined with thousands of microscopic hair cells. These aren't hairs like the ones on your head. They're specialized sensory cells with tiny projections called stereocilia that stick up into the fluid. When vibrations from sound waves reach the cochlea, they create waves in the fluid, and these waves bend the stereocilia back and forth. When stereocilia bend, they open ion channels, allowing electrical signals to flow into the hair cells. These signals then travel along the auditory nerve to your brain, specifically to the auditory cortex in your temporal lobe. Your brain interprets these electrical signals as sound, distinguishing between different frequencies, volumes, and patterns. This entire process happens almost instantaneously, allowing you to hear and respond to sounds in real time. But here's where things can go wrong. Those hair cells in your cochlea are fragile. They can be damaged by loud noise, aging, infections, certain medications, or even genetic factors. Once damaged, they don't regenerate. Unlike skin cells or blood cells that constantly replace themselves, you're born with a finite number of hair cells, and when they're gone permanently. When hair cells become damaged or die, they stop sending normal signals to your brain. You might expect this would result in silence, in an absence of sound, but your brain doesn't interpret it that way. Instead, your auditory cortex notices that it's no longer receiving signals from certain frequencies. It attempts to fill in the missing information, much like your visual system fills in your blind spot so you don't notice the gap in your vision. This compensation process is where tinnitus originates. Your brain essentially turns up the volume on the neural circuits that would normally process the missing frequencies. It increases the spontaneous activity of neurons in your auditory cortex, creating signals where none should exist. You perceive these self-generated signals as sound, but because there's no actual external sound creating them, you can't locate a source. The sound seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. There's another factor that makes tinnitus worse: the absence of background noise. During the day, you're surrounded by ambient sounds. Traffic, conversation, the hum of electronics, the rustle of movement. These sounds occupy your auditory system and mask the phantom noises your brain is generating. But at night, when you're lying in bed trying to sleep and the world is quiet, suddenly there's nothing to mask the tinnitus. The phantom sound becomes the only sound, and your attention fixates on it. This creates a vicious cycle. The more you focus on the tinnitus, the more aware of it you become. The more aware of it you become, the more your brain prioritizes those signals. Your auditory cortex, detecting that you're paying attention to this particular sound, essentially highlights it, making it seem even louder and more prominent. What started as a faint background noise becomes an overwhelming presence that dominates your awareness. Silence, paradoxically, is the enemy of tinnitus sufferers. When the world goes quiet, the phantom sound fills the void. This is why many people with tinnitus sleep with a fan running, or use white noise machines, or play soft music or nature sounds. These background noises don't eliminate the tinnitus, but they provide something else for your auditory system to focus on, something that dilutes the phantom sound and makes it less intrusive. What causes the initial hair cell damage that leads to tinnitus? Loud noise exposure is one of the most common culprits. Concerts, power tools, gunfire, headphones at high volume. Any sustained exposure to sounds above 85 decibels can damage hair cells over time. Even a single very loud noise, like an explosion or a nearby gunshot, can cause immediate and permanent damage. This is why tinnitus is so common among musicians, construction workers, military veterans, and anyone who has worked in loud environments without proper hearing protection. Aging is another major factor. As you get older, hair cells naturally degrade, even without exposure to excessive noise. This age-related hearing loss, called presbycusis, often comes with tinnitus as a companion. The loss happens gradually, usually starting with high-frequency sounds, which is why many people with age-related tinnitus hear a high-pitched ringing. Certain medications can also damage hair cells or affect the auditory system in ways that produce tinnitus. These include some antibiotics, chemotherapy drugs, high doses of aspirin, and certain diuretics. In most cases, the tinnitus resolves when the medication is stopped, but sometimes the damage is permanent. Ear infections, head injuries, and conditions that affect blood flow to the ear, like high blood pressure or atherosclerosis, can also trigger tinnitus. For some people, tinnitus has no clear cause. It simply appears one day and persists. This is called idiopathic tinnitus, and it can be particularly frustrating because there's no obvious problem to fix. The hair cells might look fine under examination, hearing tests might come back normal, and yet the phantom sound remains, a constant presence with no identifiable source. Living with tinnitus can be deeply challenging, especially when it interferes with sleep. The quiet darkness of night, which should be restorative and peaceful, becomes a space where the phantom sound grows louder. You lie there, exhausted, desperate to fall asleep, but unable to ignore the ringing or buzzing in your ears. The frustration builds. You become anxious about sleeping, which makes falling asleep even harder, which makes you more aware of the tinnitus, which increases your anxiety. It's a loop that can feel impossible to escape. Unfortunately, there's no cure for most forms of tinnitus. Once hair cells are damaged, they can't be repaired. But there are ways to manage it. Sound therapy, using background noise to mask the tinnitus, is one of the most effective strategies. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help you change how you respond to the sound, reducing the emotional distress it causes. Some people benefit from hearing aids, which amplify external sounds and make the tinnitus less noticeable by comparison. There are also experimental treatments being researched, neuromodulation techniques, which use electrical or magnetic stimulation to alter brain activity, have shown promise in some studies. Medications that affect neurotransmitter levels in the auditory cortex are being tested, and researchers are even exploring ways to regenerate hair cells, though this remains far from clinical application. The most important thing to understand about tinnitus is that while the sound is real to you, it's not a sign of danger. Your brain is generating noise, yes, but it's not because something is wrong with your brain. It's because your brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do, trying to make sense of incomplete information, trying to fill in gaps, trying to maintain your perception of a complete auditory world. It's overcompensating, creating sound where none exists, but it's not malfunctioning. It's just being overzealous. So if you're lying in bed right now and you hear that faint ringing, that persistent hum, that sound that seems to exist only inside your head, remember what it actually is. It's your brain, trying to help, trying to fill in the silence, and accidentally creating a phantom. It's annoying, it's frustrating, but it's not harmful. And, with the right strategies, you can learn to push it into the background where it belongs. But speaking of sensations that seem to come from nowhere, there's another phantom feeling your body can conjure, one that makes you think your mouth is on fire when it absolutely isn't. You take a sip of water, nothing unusual, room temperature, perfectly ordinary water, but the moment it touches your tongue, you feel it. A burning sensation, as if you just drank something scalding hot, except the water is cool. You run your tongue across the roof of your mouth. The burning intensifies. You check a mirror, expecting to see redness, blistering, some visible sign of injury, but your mouth looks completely normal. There's no burn, there's no damage. And yet, the sensation persists. A phantom fire that your nerves insist is real, even though nothing is actually burning. This is burning mouth syndrome, and it's one of the strangest and most frustrating conditions in medicine. The pain is genuine. The burning sensation is real, but there's no physical cause that doctors can find. No infection, no injury, no allergic reaction, nothing that would explain why your mouth feels like it's on fire. And for many people who experience this, the burning gets worse as the day goes on, reaching its peak in the evening and at night, precisely when they're trying to relax and fall asleep. Burning mouth syndrome affects somewhere between 1 and 3% of the population, and it's significantly more common in women, particularly those who are postmenopausal. The sensation typically affects the tongue, especially the tip and sides, but it can also involve the lips, gums, the roof of the mouth, or the entire oral cavity. Some people describe it as a burning or scalding feeling. Others say it's more like tingling or numbness. And for some, it feels like they've eaten something extremely spicy, with a lingering heat that never quite dissipates. The burning can be constant, lasting all day and night, or it can come and go in waves. For many sufferers, the pattern is predictable. The burning is mild or absent in the morning, gradually increases throughout the day, and becomes most intense in the evening. This progression makes nighttime particularly difficult. Just when your body should be winding down and preparing for sleep, your mouth erupts with discomfort that makes it nearly impossible to ignore. So, what causes this phantom burning? The honest answer is that researchers still don't fully understand it. Burning mouth syndrome is classified as a neuropathic pain disorder, which means it originates from problems with the nerves themselves rather than from actual tissue damage. Something has gone wrong with the sensory nerves in your mouth, causing them to send pain signals to your brain even when there's nothing painful happening. Your mouth is one of the most densely innervated parts of your body. It's filled with nerve endings that detect temperature, pressure, texture, and chemical composition. These nerves allow you to experience the complex sensations of taste and texture that make eating pleasurable. They also protect you by detecting potentially harmful substances or dangerous temperatures. But this dense network of nerves also means there are many opportunities for things to go wrong. In burning mouth syndrome, the leading theory is that small nerve fibers in the oral mucosa, the lining of your mouth, become damaged or dysfunctional. These are called C fibers and A delta fibers, and they're responsible for transmitting pain and temperature signals. When these fibers are damaged, they can become hyperactive, spontaneously firing signals even without any stimulus. Your brain interprets these random signals as burning or pain, creating a sensation that feels completely real even though there's no actual source. Think of it like a faulty smoke alarm. The alarm is designed to detect smoke and warn you of fire, but if the alarm malfunctions, it might start beeping randomly even when there's no smoke. The warning signal is real. The alarm is genuinely going off, but there's no actual fire. Burning mouth syndrome works similarly. The pain signal is real. Your nerves are genuinely sending distress signals to your brain, but there's no actual injury or threat causing those signals. Several factors can contribute to this nerve dysfunction. hormonal changes appear to play a significant role, which explains why postmenopausal women are particularly affected. Estrogen influences nerve function and pain perception, and when estrogen levels drop during menopause, it can make nerves more sensitive and prone to misfiring. Nutritional deficiencies, particularly deficiencies in B vitamins, iron, or zinc, can also affect nerve health and contribute to abnormal sensations in the mouth. Some cases of burning mouth syndrome are linked to conditions that affect the nerves more broadly. Diabetes, for instance, can cause neuropathy throughout the body, including in the mouth. Autoimmune conditions, thyroid disorders, and certain neurological diseases can all increase the risk of developing burning mouth syndrome. And, in some cases, the condition appears after dental procedures, suggesting that nerve damage during treatment might trigger the chronic pain. But for many people, there's no identifiable physical cause. Blood tests come back normal, vitamin levels are fine. There's no diabetes, no thyroid problem, no obvious explanation. Chronic stress, anxiety, and depression are strongly associated with burning mouth syndrome. This doesn't mean the pain is imaginary or psychosomatic. It means that psychological stress can alter how your nervous system functions, making nerves more reactive and pain signals more intense. When you're chronically stressed or anxious, your body exists in a heightened state of alert. Your nervous system becomes more sensitive. Pain thresholds lower. And your brain becomes more focused on detecting threats, which means it pays more attention to uncomfortable sensations that it might otherwise ignore. This creates a feedback loop. The burning sensation causes anxiety. The anxiety amplifies the pain signals. The amplified pain causes more anxiety. And the cycle continues, with each element reinforcing the others. The timing of burning mouth syndrome, worsening throughout the day and peaking at night, might be related to cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone. Cortisol levels naturally follow a daily rhythm, typically highest in the morning and gradually declining throughout the day. Some researchers believe that as cortisol drops in the evening, it might unmask pain signals that were previously suppressed. Others think it's simply that by evening, you're tired, your coping resources are depleted, and you're more aware of discomfort. For people trying to sleep with burning mouth syndrome, the condition becomes a significant obstacle. Pain of any kind interferes with sleep. But oral pain is particularly disruptive because it's difficult to distract yourself from sensations in your mouth. You can't ignore it. You can't position yourself differently to reduce it. It's just there, constant and uncomfortable, keeping your nervous system activated when it should be calming down. Some people find temporary relief by eating or drinking, which is why many sufferers constantly sip water or suck on ice chips. The cooling sensation and the act of swallowing seem to briefly interrupt the pain signals. But the relief is short-lived, and the burning returns as soon as the distraction ends. This can lead to disrupted sleep, with people waking frequently to drink water or find some momentary comfort. Treatment for burning mouth syndrome is challenging because there's no single cause and no cure. Doctors often start by ruling out identifiable problems. They'll check for oral infections like thrush, which can cause burning sensations. They'll test for nutritional deficiencies and correct them if found. They'll review medications, since some drugs can cause dry mouth or alter taste, which might contribute to the syndrome. If an underlying condition like diabetes or a thyroid disorder is discovered, treating it sometimes resolves the burning. But when no clear cause is found, treatment becomes more symptomatic. Some people benefit from medications that calm overactive nerves, such as certain antidepressants or anticonvulsants that are commonly used for neuropathic pain. These drugs don't eliminate the burning, but they can reduce its intensity. Cognitive behavioral therapy has shown promise in helping people manage the psychological impact of chronic pain and break the anxiety pain cycle. Some find relief from topical treatments like capsaicin, the compound that makes chili peppers hot. It sounds counterintuitive to treat burning with something that burns, but capsaicin works by temporarily overwhelming pain receptors, essentially exhausting them so they stop sending signals. Others use numbing gels or rinses, though these provide only temporary relief. And lifestyle modifications, reducing stress, avoiding irritating foods like citrus or spicy dishes, and maintaining good oral hygiene can help manage symptoms. The most frustrating aspect of burning mouth syndrome is its unpredictability. It can appear suddenly, persist for months or years, and then sometimes disappear just as mysteriously as it arrived. For some people, it becomes a chronic condition that requires ongoing management. For others, it resolves on its own, leaving them wondering what caused it in the first place. What's important to remember is that burning mouth syndrome, while uncomfortable and distressing, is not dangerous. It doesn't cause permanent damage to your mouth. It's not a sign of cancer or any life-threatening condition. It's your nerves misfiring, sending false alarms about damage that isn't occurring. Your body is reporting a fire that doesn't exist. And while that phantom fire can be exhausting and disruptive, especially when it interferes with sleep, it's ultimately just noise in your nervous system, a false signal that you can learn to manage and, with time and treatment, often reduce. But if a burning mouth feels intrusive, there's another phantom sensation that can be equally unsettling. The feeling that something is lodged in your throat when absolutely nothing is there. You're sitting at your desk, going about your day, when suddenly you become aware of a sensation in your throat. It feels like something is stuck there, a lump, an obstruction. You swallow, expecting it to clear, but it doesn't move. You swallow again, harder this time. The sensation persists, this feeling that there's something lodged in your throat that refuses to go down or come up. You reach for water, thinking maybe it's food or phlegm. You drink, you swallow, and yet the lump remains, stubborn and uncomfortable, a phantom blockage that won't resolve no matter what you do. This sensation has a name. Doctors call it globus pharyngeus, or, more commonly, globus sensation. The term comes from Latin, meaning a ball or sphere in the throat, and it's remarkably common. Studies suggest that up to 45% of people experience it at some point in their lives. For some, it's a fleeting annoyance that comes and goes. For others, it becomes a persistent presence that triggers anxiety and disrupts daily life, especially when trying to relax at night. The strange thing about globus sensation is that swallowing doesn't help. This is the opposite of what happens when something is actually stuck in your throat. If you have a piece of food lodged in your esophagus, swallowing typically either moves it along or makes the obstruction more painful. But with globus sensation, swallowing provides no relief. The lump is always there, unchanging, a constant presence that defies every attempt to clear it. The answer, like many mysteries of the body, involves a combination of physical factors and nervous system hyperactivity. Your throat is a complex intersection of muscles, nerves, and tissues that coordinate the acts of breathing, swallowing, and speaking. When this coordination gets disrupted, even slightly, it can create the sensation that something is wrong. the back of your throat, just below where your nasal passages meet your mouth, sits a ring of muscle called the cricopharyngeus. This muscle is part of your upper esophageal sphincter, and it acts as a gateway between your throat and your esophagus. When you're not swallowing, the cricopharyngeus stays contracted, keeping the sphincter closed. This prevents air from entering your esophagus when you breathe and stops stomach contents from flowing back up into your throat. When you swallow, the cricopharyngeus relaxes, opening the sphincter and allowing food or liquid to pass through into your esophagus. Then it contracts again, sealing the passage. This happens automatically, coordinated by your brainstem dozens of times a day without you ever thinking about it. But sometimes this muscle doesn't relax completely. It remains partially contracted, creating tension in the area, and this tension is what many people perceive as a lump. Think of it like a door that doesn't quite close properly. The door isn't broken, it still functions, but there's a slight misalignment, a bit of friction, something that makes it stick. You can still open and close it, but it never feels quite smooth. The cricopharyngeus works the same way. When it's tense or not relaxing fully, you feel that something is off, even though nothing is actually blocking your throat. Several factors can cause the cricopharyngeus to become tense. Stress and anxiety are major culprits. When you're stressed, your body's fight or flight response activates, and one of its effects is increased muscle tension throughout your body. This includes the muscles in your throat. The cricopharyngeus tightens, and suddenly you're aware of a sensation you normally wouldn't notice. The more you focus on it, the more tense you become, which makes the muscle contract even more. It's another one of those vicious cycles where awareness feeds anxiety and anxiety amplifies the sensation. Acid reflux is another common cause of globus sensation. When stomach acid flows back up into your esophagus, it can irritate the tissues in your throat. This irritation can cause inflammation and increased sensitivity in the area around the cricopharyngeus. Even if you don't feel the classic burning sensation of heartburn, the acid can still be present, quietly irritating your throat and creating that lump-like feeling. This is sometimes called silent reflux or laryngopharyngeal reflux. Postnasal drip can contribute as well. When mucus from your sinuses drips down the back of your throat, it can collect in the area around your larynx and upper esophagus. Your throat tries to clear this mucus by contracting and producing that sensation of needing to swallow. But because the mucus keeps accumulating, the sensation never fully resolves. You end up in a constant state of feeling like something is there that needs to be cleared. For some people, globus sensation is related to how they hold tension in their body. Just as some people carry stress in their shoulders or jaw, others unconsciously tense the muscles in their throat. This chronic tension creates the feeling of tightness or a lump. It's not imaginary. The muscles are genuinely contracted, but the contraction isn't serving any purpose. It's just your body holding on to stress in a way that happens to manifest in your throat. Globus sensation can also appear after a respiratory infection. When you've been coughing frequently or clearing your throat repeatedly, the tissues in your throat become irritated and inflamed. Even after the infection resolves, the heightened sensitivity can remain for weeks. Your throat remembers the irritation, and your nervous system stays on high alert, interpreting normal sensations as something abnormal. The timing of globus sensation can be telling. Many people notice it most during the evening or at night when they're trying to relax. This makes sense when you consider what's happening physiologically. During the day, you're distracted by work, conversations, and activities. Your attention is directed outward. But when you lie down at night and the world quiets, your attention turns inward. Suddenly you notice sensations that were there all along but were previously filtered out by your busy mind. Lying down also changes the dynamics of your throat. When you're upright, gravity helps keep stomach acid down and mucus draining properly. When you lie flat, acid can more easily flow back up into your esophagus, and mucus can pool in your throat. These changes can intensify the globus sensation right when you're trying to fall asleep, making it particularly frustrating. The anxiety that globus sensation creates can be significant. Your throat is essential for breathing, and any sensation that something is blocking it can trigger primal fear. Even though you're breathing normally and there's no actual obstruction, your brain interprets the sensation as a potential threat. This activates your stress response, which increases muscle tension, which makes the globus sensation worse. You become hyper-aware of every swallow, every breath, every subtle sensation in your throat. This hyper-awareness is exhausting, especially at night. You lie in bed, acutely conscious of your throat, swallowing repeatedly, trying to make the sensation go away. But the more you focus on it, the more prominent it becomes. Sleep becomes elusive because part of your mind is constantly monitoring your throat, waiting for the lump to disappear or worsen. The fear that something might actually be wrong keeps your nervous system activated when it should be winding down. The good news is that globus sensation, while uncomfortable and anxiety-provoking, is almost always benign. It's not a sign of cancer. It's not a sign of a serious throat condition. Doctors can perform examinations and tests to rule out actual structural problems, and in the vast majority of cases, they find nothing wrong. Your throat looks normal. There's no tumor, no growth, no physical obstruction, just that persistent sensation that something is there. Treatment for globus sensation focuses on addressing the underlying causes. If acid reflux is contributing, medications that reduce stomach acid or lifestyle changes like avoiding late meals and elevating the head of your bed can help. If postnasal drip is the culprit, treating allergies or sinus issues often resolves the globus sensation. If muscle tension is the problem, relaxation techniques, throat exercises, and stress management can reduce the tightness. Speech therapists sometimes work with people who have globus sensation, teaching them exercises to relax the throat muscles and become less focused on the sensation. The exercises aren't complicated. They involve gentle humming, controlled breathing, and techniques to reduce the urge to constantly swallow or clear your throat. The goal is to break the cycle of hyper-awareness and muscle tension. Cognitive approaches can be helpful as well. When you understand that the lump is a sensation caused by muscle tension or minor irritation rather than an actual blockage, it becomes less frightening. You can learn to acknowledge the sensation without panicking about it. This reduces the anxiety, which reduces the muscle tension, which often diminishes the globus sensation itself. What's important to remember is that globus pharyngeus is your nervous system being overly vigilant. It's detecting a minor irregularity, a bit of muscle tension or slight inflammation, and interpreting it as something significant. Your body is sounding an alarm for something that doesn't warrant alarm. The lump you feel isn't a blockage. It's not preventing you from breathing or swallowing. It's just an uncomfortable sensation, a false signal from an overly protective system. So if you're lying in bed right now, aware of that persistent lump in your throat, That sensation that won't go away no matter how many times you swallow. Take a slow breath and remind yourself what it actually is. It's tension. It's sensitivity. It's your body misreading normal sensations as abnormal. There's nothing stuck. There's nothing blocking your airway. It's just your throat being a little too vigilant, a little too tense, reporting a problem that doesn't actually exist. And while your throat creates phantom lumps, your eyes might be staging their own small rebellion, a twitch that feels impossible to control. You're sitting at your computer, focused on work, when you feel it, a tiny flutter under your eye, a small spasm in your eyelid that pulses rhythmically, visibly, maddeningly. You reach up and touch your face, trying to stop it, but the moment you remove your finger, it starts again. Twitch, twitch, twitch. A relentless little dance that you can feel intensely, but that nobody else seems to notice. You check a mirror, and there it is, a subtle tremor in the skin beneath your eye, beating out its own strange rhythm, completely independent of your control. This is eyelid myokemia, the medical term for those involuntary eyelid twitches that plague so many people, and while it feels dramatic and conspicuous when it's happening to you, it's almost always invisible to everyone else. The twitch that feels like it's shaking your entire face is usually just a barely perceptible flutter that others wouldn't notice unless they were staring directly at your eye from inches away. But to you, lying in bed at night, still feeling that subtle pulsing, it can feel impossible to ignore. Eyelid twitches are incredibly common. Some studies suggest that up to 70% of people experience them at some point. For most, they're occasional annoyances that last a few minutes or perhaps a few hours before disappearing. But for some people, especially during periods of stress or fatigue, the twitches can persist for days or even weeks, coming and going throughout the day and becoming more noticeable during quiet moments, like when you're trying to fall asleep. So what exactly is happening when your eyelid twitches? The answer lies in the tiny muscles that control your eyelids and the nerves that command them. Your eyelids are moved by several muscles, but the main one responsible for closing your eyes is called the orbicularis oculi. This circular muscle wraps around your eye like a sphincter, and when it contracts, it pulls your eyelids together. When it relaxes, your eyelids open. This muscle is made up of thousands of individual muscle fibers, and each fiber is controlled by motor neurons, nerve cells that send electrical signals from your brain to tell the muscle when to contract. Normally, these signals are coordinated and purposeful. Your brain decides to blink, sends the signal, and your eyelid closes and opens smoothly. You blink approximately 15 to 20 times per minute during the day, usually without any conscious awareness. But sometimes, small groups of muscle fibers within the orbicularis oculi start firing spontaneously. They contract and relax rapidly, independent of any signal from your brain. These aren't full blinks. They're tiny, localized spasms affecting just a small section of the muscle. Because the contractions are small and isolated, they don't close your eye. They just create that visible, pulsing flutter in your eyelid. Why do these spontaneous contractions happen? The most common triggers are fatigue, stress, and caffeine. When you're tired, your nervous system doesn't function as precisely as it should. The neurons controlling your muscles can become hyperexcitable, firing more easily and sometimes without proper cause. Think of it like a guitar string that's wound too tightly. It vibrates more readily, responding to even tiny disturbances that normally wouldn't affect it. Stress has a similar effect. When you're under chronic stress, Your body releases hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that heighten nervous system activity. Your neurons become more reactive. Small fluctuations in electrical activity that would normally be dampened or ignored instead trigger muscle contractions. This is why eyelid twitches often appear during particularly stressful periods at work, during exams, or when you're dealing with significant life challenges. Caffeine is a direct stimulant to your nervous system. It blocks adenosine receptors in your brain, preventing the calming signals that normally help regulate neural activity. When you consume too much caffeine, especially if you're sensitive to it, your motor neurons can become overactive. They fire more frequently and more easily. This can manifest as eyelid twitches, but also as twitches in other muscles throughout your body, little fasciculations that appear and disappear seemingly at random. Eye strain contributes as well. If you spend hours staring at screens without adequate breaks, your eye muscles become fatigued. The muscles that control eye movement and focusing work constantly when you're reading or looking at a monitor, and like any overworked muscle, they can develop spasms. The orbicularis oculi, while not directly involved in focusing, is part of the interconnected system of muscles around your eyes, and strain in one area can affect others. Dry eyes can also trigger twitches. When your eyes don't produce enough tears, or when the tears evaporate too quickly, your eyes become irritated. This irritation stimulates the nerves in and around your eyelids, and this stimulation can cause the muscles to twitch. People who wear contact lenses, work in air-conditioned environments, or have certain medical conditions are particularly prone to dry eyes and the twitches that can accompany them. Nutritional factors play a role too, though less commonly. Magnesium deficiency has been linked to muscle twitches throughout the body, including in the eyelids. Magnesium is essential for proper nerve and muscle function, helping to regulate the electrical signals that control muscle contractions. When levels are low, muscles can become more prone to spasms. Similarly, inadequate electrolyte balance, particularly after intense exercise or dehydration, can affect muscle control. What makes eyelid twitches so frustrating is their persistence and the way they capture your attention. The eyelid is in your direct line of sight. Every twitch happens right in your field of vision, impossible to ignore. And because you can feel the spasm and see the movement simultaneously, it becomes doubly intrusive. Your brain, already primed to pay attention to things related to your face and vision, fixates on the sensation. This attention creates a feedback loop. The more you focus on the twitch, the more aware of it you become. The more aware you become, the more it bothers you. The more it bothers you, the more stressed you feel. And stress, as we've established, makes the twitching worse. You end up trapped in a cycle where your concern about the twitch is actually perpetuating it. At night, this becomes particularly problematic. You're lying in bed, trying to relax, but you can still feel that intermittent flutter. Your eyelid pulses against the pillow. You become hyper-aware of every sensation around your eyes. This hypervigilance keeps your nervous system activated, making it harder to fall asleep, and the lack of sleep makes you more fatigued, which makes the twitching more likely to continue the next day. Another vicious cycle. The good news is that eyelid twitches are almost always benign. They're classified as benign fasciculations, meaning they're harmless muscle spasms that don't indicate any serious underlying condition. They don't damage your eye or your vision. They don't lead to more serious neurological problems. They're just annoying, a temporary glitch in your neuromuscular system that will resolve on its own. In rare cases, persistent twitching can indicate a more serious condition, If the twitch involves more than just your eyelid, if it affects other parts of your face, or if it's accompanied by drooping of the eyelid, changes in vision, or other neurological symptoms, it's worth seeing a doctor. Conditions like blepharospasm, a more severe form of eyelid spasm, or hemifacial spasm, which affects one entire side of the face, require medical evaluation. But these conditions are uncommon, and they present with symptoms more dramatic than simple eyelid twitching. For typical benign eyelid twitches, the treatment is simple. Address the triggers. If you're exhausted, prioritize sleep. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality rest each night. If stress is a factor, find ways to manage it, whether through exercise, meditation, breathing techniques, or simply taking regular breaks during your day. If you're consuming excessive caffeine, cut back gradually. Reduce your intake and see if the twitching diminishes. If eye strain is contributing, follow the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for at least 20 seconds. This gives your eye muscles a break from the constant near-focus work of reading or screen time. If dry eyes are the problem, use artificial tears or lubricating eye drops to keep your eyes moistened, and make sure you're blinking regularly, especially when focusing on screens, as people tend to blink less frequently during concentrated visual tasks. Warm compresses can help relax the muscles around your eyes. Apply a warm, damp cloth to your closed eyelids for a few minutes. The heat increases blood flow and helps release tension. Gentle massage around the eye area can have a similar effect, though be careful not to press too hard or irritate the sensitive skin. Most importantly, try not to fixate on the twitch. Easier said than done, certainly, but the more you can ignore it, the less your stress response will amplify it. The twitch is just a small group of muscle fibers contracting unnecessarily. It's not a threat, it's not a sign that something is seriously wrong. It's your nervous system being a bit overactive, sending signals that don't need to be sent. And like most things your overactive nervous system does, it will calm down when you give it the rest, hydration, and reduced stimulation it needs. So tonight, if you feel that flutter beneath your eye, that rhythmic pulse that seems to have a mind of its own, remember what it actually is. It's fatigue, it's stress, it's caffeine or eye strain, or simply your nervous system having a moment of hyperactivity. It's not dangerous, it's not permanent, and it will stop on its own when your body gets what it needs. But speaking of sensations that feel strange and uncontrollable, there's another experience your body creates that makes you wonder if something has gone very wrong with your circulation. You've been sitting cross-legged on the floor for a while, absorbed in a book or watching something on your phone. Time passes without you noticing. Then you decide to stand up, and the moment you try to move your leg, you realize something is wrong. Your foot feels strange, heavy, disconnected. You look down and try to wiggle your toes, but they barely respond. The sensation is bizarre, as if your foot has been replaced with something that only vaguely resembles a foot. And then, as blood flow returns, the tingling begins. Pins and needles, thousands of them, pricking every square inch of skin. It's uncomfortable, unsettling, and oddly fascinating all at once. This sensation has a medical name, paresthesia. It's the temporary numbness and tingling that happens when you compress a nerve or restrict blood flow to a limb. Your leg or arm is said to have fallen asleep, though of course it's not actually sleeping. What's happening is a disruption in the normal communication between your limbs and your brain, a temporary short circuit that makes your body feel foreign to itself. Paresthesia is universal. Everyone has experienced it at some point. You sit on your foot too long. You rest your head on your arm while lying down. You cross your legs tightly for an extended period. And when you finally move, your limb protests with numbness followed by that distinctive prickling sensation. It's uncomfortable but harmless, and most people simply shake it off and wait for normal sensation to return. But understanding what's actually happening reveals something fascinating about how your nervous system works. Your body is mapped out in incredible detail by your nervous system. Every square centimeter of your skin contains nerve endings that detect touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. These sensory receptors constantly send information to your spinal cord and brain, creating your sense of physical awareness. This ongoing stream of sensory data is what allows you to know where your body is in space, even with your eyes closed. These sensory signals travel along peripheral nerves, bundles of nerve fibers that extend from your spinal cord out to your arms, legs, hands, and feet. Think of these nerves as cables carrying electrical signals. When you touch something, the sensation is converted into an electrical impulse that travels up the nerve, through your spinal cord, and into your brain, where it's interpreted as a specific type of touch or pressure. But nerves need two things to function properly. They need oxygen, delivered by blood flow, and they need physical space to transmit signals without interference. When you sit in a position that compresses a nerve or restricts blood flow to an area, both of these requirements get compromised. The nerve can't get enough oxygen, and the physical pressure disrupts its ability to transmit signals cleanly. When you first compress a nerve, the signals from that area start to diminish. Your brain receives less information from the affected limb. This is the numbness phase. Your foot is still there, but your brain has lost contact with it. You can see your foot, you know intellectually that it exists, but the sensory feedback is gone. It's a strange form of disconnection, where your conscious awareness of your body doesn't match the physical reality. If you try to move the numb limb, it feels clumsy and uncoordinated. This is because movement isn't just about sending signals from your brain to your muscles. It also requires constant sensory feedback from your limbs, telling your brain where they are and what they're touching. Without this feedback, your motor control becomes imprecise. You might stumble when you try to walk on a sleeping foot because your brain can't accurately judge where your foot is in relation to the ground. Then comes the recovery phase, and this is where things get interesting. When you finally shift position and release the pressure on the nerve or restore blood flow to the area, the nerve begins to wake up, but it doesn't wake up smoothly. As oxygen returns and the physical compression releases, the nerve starts firing signals again, but in a chaotic, disorganized way. Nerve fibers that were temporarily silenced suddenly fire in rapid, irregular bursts. Your brain interprets these chaotic signals as the pins and needles sensation. The nerve is essentially misfiring, sending random signals that your brain struggles to make sense of. Some signals register as tingling, others as prickling, some as a strange crawling sensation under your skin. It's uncomfortable because your brain knows something is wrong with the signal quality, but it can't pinpoint exactly what the problem is. The pins and needles sensation typically follows a predictable progression. It starts as a faint tingling, then intensifies into a more pronounced prickling or burning feeling. At its peak, it can actually be somewhat painful, especially if you try to put weight on the affected limb or touch it with your other hand. Then, gradually, as the nerve fully recovers and begins transmitting normal signals again, the sensation fades. Within a few minutes, everything returns to normal, and your limb feels completely fine. Certain positions are particularly likely to cause paresthesia. Sitting cross-legged compresses the nerves that run behind your knees and restricts blood flow to your lower legs and feet. Sleeping with your arm under your head or body puts pressure on the nerves in your shoulder and arm. Leaning on your elbows for extended periods compresses the ulnar nerve, which runs close to the surface at your elbow. That's the nerve responsible for the funny bone sensation when you hit your elbow just right. Some people are more prone to paresthesia than others. If you have poor circulation, your limbs might fall asleep more easily because blood flow is already compromised. People with conditions like diabetes can experience more frequent paresthesia because high blood sugar can damage nerves over time, making them more sensitive to pressure. Vitamin deficiencies, particularly B vitamins that are essential for nerve health, can also increase susceptibility. During sleep, paresthesia can become particularly disruptive. You might wake up in the middle of the night with a completely numb arm or hand, having slept on it in an awkward position. The sudden awareness of a limb that feels dead can be alarming, especially in that disoriented state between sleep and wakefulness. You might shake your arm vigorously, trying to restore sensation, and then have to endure several minutes of intense pins and needles before you can comfortably return to sleep. Some sleep positions make this more likely. Sleeping on your side with your arm under your pillow compresses nerves and restricts circulation. Sleeping with your wrists bent can compress the median nerve that runs through your wrist, potentially causing numbness in your hand. People who sleep very deeply and don't shift positions regularly during the night are more prone to waking with numb limbs. The experience of paresthesia can trigger anxiety, especially if you don't immediately recognize what's happening. The numbness can feel like paralysis. The intense tingling can feel like nerve damage. And if you've recently been reading about medical conditions or feeling health anxious, it's easy to catastrophize, to imagine that this temporary numbness is actually a stroke or a serious neurological problem. But the key feature of benign paresthesia is that it resolves quickly. Within minutes of changing position, sensation returns completely. There's no lasting weakness, no persistent numbness, no other symptoms. If numbness persists for extended periods, spreads to other areas, or is accompanied by weakness, pain, or other neurological symptoms, that's when it might indicate something more serious. But the vast majority of pins and needles experiences are completely harmless. Preventing paresthesia is mostly about awareness. Notice the positions you tend to hold for long periods and make an effort to shift regularly. If you're sitting at a desk, stand up and move every 30 to 45 minutes. If you're reading or watching something on the floor, adjust your position before your legs have a chance to fall asleep. When you sleep, try to avoid positions that put prolonged pressure on your arms or hands. Some people find that staying hydrated and maintaining good circulation through regular movement helps reduce the frequency of paresthesia. Exercise improves blood flow and keeps nerves healthy. Stretching can release compression points and improve flexibility, making it less likely you'll get stuck in positions that restrict circulation. The important thing to remember is that paresthesia is your body's temporary glitch, not a malfunction. It's what happens when you accidentally cut off the communication line between your limbs and your brain. The numbness is the silence when the line goes dead. The tingling is the static and interference as the line comes back online. And within moments, the connection is restored, clear and strong, as if nothing ever happened. So the next time your foot falls asleep and you're stuck waiting through those uncomfortable minutes of pins and needles, you'll know exactly what's happening. Your nerves are waking up, firing chaotically as they re-establish normal function. It's not pleasant, but it's not dangerous. It's just your body recalibrating, reconnecting, returning to its normal state of awareness. And once it does, you can move on, completely unharmed. But while pins and needles come from too much pressure, there's another sensation that can make you feel like you're not getting enough of something crucial, enough air. You're sitting in a quiet room, perfectly calm, doing nothing physically demanding, when suddenly you become aware of your breathing. It feels wrong, shallow, insufficient. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs completely, but somehow it doesn't feel like enough. You breathe again, deeper this time, trying to get that satisfying feeling of a full breath, but it eludes you. Your chest feels tight, your throat feels constricted, and despite the fact that you're clearly getting air, your body insists that you're not breathing properly, that you're somehow not getting enough oxygen. This sensation is called air hunger or dyspnea, and it's one of the most anxiety-inducing experiences your body can create. Breathing is automatic, essential, and normally completely outside your conscious awareness. You breathe roughly 12 to 20 times per minute, every hour, every day, without thinking about it. But when you suddenly become aware that breathing feels difficult, when it seems like you can't get a satisfying breath, it triggers deep primal fear. Your survival depends on breathing. Any threat to that process feels like a threat to your life itself. The strange and frustrating truth is that most of the time when people experience this sensation, their oxygen levels are completely normal. If you were to check with a pulse oximeter, a small device that clips onto your finger and measures the oxygen saturation in your blood, it would likely read 95 to 100%. Your lungs are working perfectly, your blood is carrying plenty of oxygen, and yet your brain is convinced that you're suffocating. To understand why this happens, you need to understand how your body actually regulates breathing. Breathing isn't controlled by oxygen levels, at least not primarily. The main driver of your breathing rate is carbon dioxide. Your cells constantly produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct of metabolism. This carbon dioxide dissolves in your blood, forming carbonic acid, which lowers your blood's pH, making it more acidic. In the brainstem, specifically in an area called the medulla oblongata, there are specialized sensors called chemoreceptors. These sensors constantly monitor the pH of your blood and the levels of carbon dioxide. When carbon dioxide levels rise and pH drops, these chemoreceptors detect the change and send signals that increase your breathing rate and depth. You breathe more to expel the excess carbon dioxide, bringing your blood chemistry back into balance. This system is remarkably sensitive. Even small increases in carbon dioxide trigger stronger breathing urges. This is why when you exercise and your muscles produce more carbon dioxide, you automatically breathe harder and faster. You're not responding to a lack of oxygen, you're responding to an accumulation of carbon dioxide. In fact, your body tolerates low oxygen levels far better than it tolerates high carbon dioxide levels. Here's where air hunger gets complicated. When you're anxious or stressed, your breathing pattern changes. You might start breathing more quickly or more shallowly, or you might unconsciously hold your breath or breathe irregularly. These changes can actually lower your carbon dioxide levels too much, a condition called hypocapnia. When carbon dioxide drops below normal levels, several things happen that create the sensation of not being able to breathe properly. Low carbon dioxide causes the blood vessels in your brain to constrict slightly. This reduces blood flow to certain areas, which can create feelings of lightheadedness, dizziness, or a sense of unreality. It also affects the oxygen-hemoglobin dissociation curve, making it slightly harder for oxygen to be released from your blood into your tissues. Paradoxically, breathing too much makes oxygen delivery less efficient, even though your blood oxygen levels remain high. Low carbon dioxide also increases the excitability of your nervous system. Your nerves and muscles become more sensitive and prone to spasms. You might feel tingling in your fingers or around your mouth. Your chest muscles might feel tight. And, crucially, the chemoreceptors in your brainstem become confused. They're calibrated to expect certain carbon dioxide levels, and when those levels are abnormally low, the signals they send become inconsistent. Your brain receives mixed messages about whether you're breathing adequately. This is where the vicious cycle begins. You feel like you can't get a good breath, so you try to breathe more deeply or more frequently. But this actually worsens the carbon dioxide imbalance, making the air hunger sensation more intense. You become hyper-aware of every breath, monitoring constantly, trying to control what should be an automatic process. This hyper-awareness activates your stress response, which releases adrenaline, which makes you breathe even faster. The cycle feeds itself. The feeling of air hunger can be particularly intense at night when you're trying to sleep. You lie down, the room is quiet, and suddenly you become aware of your breathing. Maybe you notice that one breath didn't feel quite right. You take another breath, focusing on it, trying to make it feel satisfying. But the more you focus, the less automatic breathing becomes. You're now manually controlling something that works best when left alone, and manual control is always less smooth than automatic regulation. Lying down also changes the mechanics of breathing slightly. When you're upright, gravity helps your diaphragm move downward easily. When you lie flat, especially on your back, your abdominal organs put slight pressure on your diaphragm, making breaths feel a tiny bit more effortful. For most people, this difference is imperceptible. But if you're already anxious about breathing, this subtle change can feel significant. Some people experience air hunger specifically when they're trying to fall asleep, right at that transition point between wakefulness and sleep. As you drift towards sleep, your breathing naturally slows and becomes more shallow. Your brainstem takes over completely, regulating breathing at a slower, more relaxed pace appropriate for rest. But if part of your conscious mind is still monitoring your breathing, it might interpret this natural slowing as a problem. You jolt awake with a gasp, convinced you stopped breathing. This can create significant sleep anxiety. You become afraid to fall asleep because you fear you'll stop breathing. You lie awake, monitoring every breath, ensuring they continue. But this vigilance prevents you from relaxing enough to actually sleep. And the sleep deprivation that results makes you more anxious, which makes the breathing sensations worse. Another self-perpetuating loop. It's important to distinguish between air hunger caused by anxiety and breathing difficulties caused by actual respiratory or cardiac problems. If you have a lung condition like asthma or COPD, if you have heart disease, if you experience shortness of breath with exertion or chest pain, those are real physiological issues that need medical attention. But if your breathing feels difficult only in certain situations, particularly when you're at rest and anxious, and if your oxygen saturation is normal, you're likely experiencing anxiety-induced air hunger rather than a true respiratory problem. One of the most effective ways to manage air hunger is counterintuitive. Instead of trying to breathe more, you need to breathe less. Specifically, you need to breathe more slowly and allow your carbon dioxide levels to normalize. This is where techniques like controlled breathing, box breathing, or simply breathing through your nose instead of your mouth can help. When you breathe through your nose, you naturally breathe more slowly. The resistance of the nasal passages slows airflow and increases the time each breath takes. This gives your body time to exchange gases properly and prevents you from overbreathing. Box breathing, where you inhale for a count of 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4, forces a slow, rhythmic pattern that helps reset your carbon dioxide levels. The hardest part is resisting the urge to take those big, gasping breaths that feel like they should help but actually make things worse. When you feel air hunger, your instinct is to breathe deeply and quickly. But this instinct, while well-intentioned, perpetuates the problem. What you actually need is to slow down, breathe gently, and trust that your body knows how to regulate itself. This requires a significant mental shift. You have to accept that the sensation of not getting enough air doesn't mean you're actually not getting enough air. Your feelings and the physiological reality are mismatched. Your body is sounding a false alarm, creating a sense of breathlessness when your blood oxygen is perfectly adequate. Learning to recognize this mismatch and not respond to the false alarm is key. Mindfulness and acceptance techniques can be helpful here. Instead of fighting the sensation or trying to fix it with more breathing, you acknowledge it. You notice the feeling of air hunger without judging it or panicking about it. You remind yourself that your oxygen levels are fine and that the sensation, while uncomfortable, isn't dangerous. Often, simply acknowledging the sensation without trying to change it allows it to gradually fade. Exercise can help as well. Regular physical activity improves your body's efficiency at using oxygen and managing carbon dioxide. It also increases your tolerance for the sensation of breathlessness. When you exercise regularly, you become familiar with what it feels like to breathe hard, and this familiarity can reduce the fear response when you experience air hunger at rest. What's crucial to understand is that air hunger, when not caused by actual respiratory disease, is your nervous system being overly sensitive to normal variations in breathing. It's treating a slight change in carbon dioxide or a moment of conscious awareness as a crisis. Your body thinks you're suffocating when you're actually breathing perfectly well. It's a false alarm, one that feels terrifying but signifies no actual danger. So tonight, if you find yourself lying in bed convinced you can't breathe properly, pause for a moment. Check your actual breathing. Is air moving in and out? It is. Are you conscious and alert? You are. Then your oxygen levels are fine. The sensation of not getting enough air is just that, a sensation, a misinterpretation of normal breathing patterns by an overactive nervous system. Trust your body's automatic systems. Let go of conscious control and allow your breathing to return to its natural, effortless rhythm. But while your breath might sometimes feel wrong, there's another sensation your body creates that seems to come from absolutely nowhere, an itch with no visible cause. You're lying in bed, finally relaxed, your mind beginning to drift towards sleep, and then you feel it, an itch, not on the surface of your skin, but somehow deeper, more diffuse, impossible to pinpoint. You reach down and scratch, and for a moment there's relief. But seconds later, the itch returns, this time in a slightly different spot. You scratch again and again. Soon you're caught in a cycle of itching and scratching that pulls you further from sleep with every passing minute. You examine your skin in frustration, searching for a cause. A bug bite, a rash, dry skin, anything. But your skin looks completely normal. The itch has no visible source. It's simply there, persistent and maddening. This is psychogenic itching. and it's far more common than most people realize. The term psychogenic doesn't mean the itch is imaginary or that you're making it up. The sensation is completely real. What it means is that the itch originates in your nervous system rather than from any actual irritation of your skin. Your nerves are generating itch signals without any external trigger, creating a phantom sensation that feels identical to a real itch but has no physical cause. To understand how your body can create an itch from nothing, you need to understand what itch actually is. For a long time, scientists thought itch was just a mild form of pain, that the same nerves transmitted both sensations. But research has revealed that itch is its own distinct sensation, with dedicated nerve pathways that are separate from pain. Your skin contains specialized nerve endings called proprioceptors that specifically detect itch-inducing stimuli. These proprioceptors respond to various triggers, chemical irritants like histamine, which your body releases during allergic reactions or in response to insect bites, physical irritants like wool fibers or certain plant oils, temperature changes, even light touch can activate these receptors under certain circumstances. When proprioceptors are stimulated, they send signals along specific nerve fibers to your spinal cord and then up to your brain, where the sensation is interpreted as itch. But here's where things get interesting. Your brain doesn't just passively receive itch signals. It actively modulates them, amplifying some and suppressing others based on context, attention, and emotional state. This central processing of itch signals is where psychogenic itching originates. Even without any stimulation of your skin's proprioceptors, your brain can generate the sensation of itching through top-down processes. Stress is one of the most powerful triggers for psychogenic itching. When you're under chronic stress, your body releases cortisol and other stress hormones. These hormones affect your immune system, making it more reactive. One consequence is increased histamine release from mast cells, specialized immune cells scattered throughout your skin and other tissues. Even without an allergic trigger, stress can cause these cells to release histamine, which then activates proprioceptors and creates real itching. But stress also works through purely neural pathways. Anxiety activates areas of your brain involved in threat detection and bodily awareness. When these areas are hyperactive, you become more sensitive to sensations from your body. Normal background signals from your skin, the kind of subtle sensory information that your brain usually filters out, suddenly get amplified and interpreted as itch. You're essentially paying too much attention to your skin, and that attention creates sensations that wouldn't otherwise reach your conscious awareness. This is why thinking about itching can make you itch. Right now, as you're listening to this description, you might notice an urge to scratch somewhere. That's not coincidence. Simply focusing attention on the concept of itching primes your brain to notice any subtle sensations from your skin. Your brain, now looking for itch signals, finds them everywhere. Most of these signals were always there, just filtered out as irrelevant noise. But now they've been promoted to conscious awareness. Nocturnal itching, itching that occurs specifically at night, has additional factors at play. Your body follows a circadian rhythm for many processes, including inflammation and itch sensitivity. Studies have shown that itch intensity naturally increases in the evening and peaks during the night. This happens because your body's production of corticosteroids, natural anti-inflammatory hormones, decreases at night. With less natural suppression of inflammation, itch signals become more prominent. Body temperature also rises slightly during the night, particularly under blankets. Warmth dilates blood vessels and increases blood flow to the skin, which can enhance itching. The increased temperature also makes proprioceptors more sensitive, lowering the threshold for itch sensation. What might not trigger itching during the day becomes intensely itchy at night simply because of this temperature effect. Then there's the problem of attention. During the day, your mind is occupied with work, conversations, activities, a constant stream of sensory input and cognitive tasks. All of this provides distraction from minor physical sensations. But at night, lying in the dark and quiet, there's nothing to distract you. Your attention naturally turns inward, scanning your body for sensations. And when you scan for sensations, you find them. That faint tickle that would go unnoticed during the day becomes impossible to ignore at night. Scratching provides temporary relief through a fascinating mechanism. When you scratch an itch, you're essentially creating mild pain in that area. Pain and itch signals use different pathways, and pain signals can suppress itch signals through a process called counter-irritation. The mild pain from scratching temporarily overrides the itch sensation, providing relief. But this relief comes with a cost. Scratching damages the skin slightly, even if not visibly. This damage triggers inflammation, which releases more histamine and other itch-inducing chemicals. So, while scratching stops the itch in the moment, it actually makes itching worse in the long term. This creates the itch-scratch cycle. You itch, you scratch, you get brief relief, but then you itch more intensely. You scratch again, more vigorously this time. The cycle escalates, and before long, you've scratched the same spot so many times that your skin is red, irritated, and now itching for a legitimate reason. What started as a phantom itch has created a real one. Breaking this cycle requires restraint, which is extraordinarily difficult when you're lying in bed trying to sleep and every fiber of your being wants to scratch. But there are strategies that can help. First, if you must address the itch, don't scratch. Instead, apply pressure to the area. Press down firmly with your palm or fingers. This stimulates different nerve endings and can provide relief without causing the damage that scratching does. Cooling the skin can reduce itch intensity. The nerve fibers that transmit cold sensations can inhibit itch signals. Some people keep a cooling gel or aloe vera in the refrigerator specifically for nighttime itching. Applying a cool, damp cloth to itchy areas can provide relief without perpetuating the itch-scratch cycle. Moisturizing your skin before bed can help as well, even if dryness isn't the primary cause. The act of applying lotion provides gentle sensory input that can temporarily distract from itching. Managing stress and anxiety more broadly often reduces psychogenic itching. If your nervous system is calmer overall, it's less likely to generate phantom sensations. Relaxation techniques, regular exercise, adequate sleep, all the things that support nervous system health can reduce the frequency and intensity of unexplained itching. Some people find that antihistamines taken before bed help, even when there's no clear allergic component. The sedating effect of some antihistamines might be as important as their itch-reducing properties. It's worth noting that persistent, unexplained itching can sometimes indicate underlying medical conditions. Liver disease, kidney disease, thyroid disorders, certain cancers, and other systemic conditions can cause generalized itching. If your itching is severe, persistent, or accompanied by other symptoms like fatigue, weight loss, or changes in skin color, it's important to see a doctor. But if your itching is occasional, worsens with stress, and occurs primarily when you're trying to relax or sleep, it's likely psychogenic. The most important thing to understand is that psychogenic itching doesn't mean you're crazy or that the sensation isn't real. Your nervous system is genuinely producing itch signals. The fact that these signals originate in your brain rather than from an irritant on your skin doesn't make them any less real or less uncomfortable. It just means the cause is internal rather than external, and that the solution involves calming your nervous system rather than treating your skin. Your brain, in its constant effort to monitor your body and protect you from threats, sometimes becomes overvigilant. It scans for problems, and finding minor sensations that would normally be ignored, interprets them as significant. The itch is your brain's way of saying something might be wrong here, we should investigate. But most of the time, nothing is wrong. Your skin is fine. The threat is imaginary, and the best response is not to scratch, but to acknowledge the sensation, recognize it as a false alarm, and gently redirect your attention elsewhere. So tonight, if phantom itches appear as you're trying to sleep, resist the urge to scratch. Take a slow breath. Remind yourself that your skin is perfectly fine. Apply pressure if you need relief. Cool the area if necessary. But don't engage in the scratch cycle that will keep you awake and create real irritation where none existed before. Your nervous system is simply being overly cautious, detecting threats that aren't there. And like all the other false alarms your body sounds, this one will quiet down when you stop responding to it. But speaking of your body creating sensations that catch your attention at the worst possible moments, there's another one that happens with startling regularity, especially when you stand up too quickly. You've been lying in bed for a while, reading or scrolling through your phone. Then you remember something you need to do, so you swing your legs over the side of the bed and stand up quickly, and immediately the world tilts. Your vision darkens around the edges, narrowing to a tunnel. The room seems to sway. You feel lightheaded, unsteady, as if you might faint. You grab the edge of the bed or the nightstand, steadying yourself, and within a few seconds the sensation passes. Your vision clears. Your balance returns, and you're left wondering what just happened and whether you should be concerned. This is orthostatic hypotension, a temporary drop in blood pressure that occurs when you stand up too quickly. The term orthostatic means related to standing upright, and hypotension means low blood pressure. It's an incredibly common experience, affecting nearly everyone at some point, but it can be particularly frequent in certain situations. When you're dehydrated, when you've been lying down for an extended period, or when you stand up abruptly after being in a relaxed state. To understand why standing up can make you dizzy, you need to understand how your cardiovascular system manages blood pressure and blood flow. Your brain, positioned at the top of your body, requires a constant supply of oxygen-rich blood. This blood is pumped from your heart, against gravity, up through your neck and into your brain. When you're lying down, your heart doesn't have to work very hard to get blood to your brain because everything is at roughly the same level. Blood flows easily in all directions. But when you stand up, everything changes. Suddenly, gravity is working against you. Blood that was distributed evenly throughout your body when you were horizontal now wants to pool in your legs and lower body, drawn downward by gravity. If nothing compensated for this, blood pressure in your upper body and brain would drop dramatically, and you would faint every time you stood up. Fortunately, your body has sophisticated mechanisms to prevent this. The moment you stand, sensors called baroreceptors detect the change in position and the initial drop in blood pressure. These baroreceptors are located in your carotid arteries, in your neck, and in your aorta, the main artery leaving your heart. They constantly monitor blood pressure and send this information to your brainstem. When baroreceptors detect that blood pressure has dropped, they trigger a rapid compensatory response. Your heart rate increases, pumping more blood with each beat. The blood vessels in your legs and abdomen constrict, squeezing blood upward toward your heart and brain. Your breathing might deepen slightly, helping to push blood through your chest. All of these adjustments happen within seconds, usually so smoothly that you don't notice anything at all. But sometimes this response is delayed or insufficient. Maybe you stood up too quickly, faster than your baroreceptors could react. Maybe you're dehydrated, so there's less blood volume to work with. Maybe you've been lying down so long that your blood vessels have fully relaxed and need extra time to constrict. Or maybe your autonomic nervous system, which controls these automatic responses, is temporarily not functioning at peak efficiency due to fatigue, medication, or other factors. When the compensatory response is delayed, there's a brief window, usually lasting just a few seconds, where blood pressure in your brain drops below optimal levels. Your brain is extraordinarily sensitive to changes in blood flow. Even a small, temporary reduction in oxygen delivery triggers symptoms. The most noticeable is the change in vision. Your visual cortex, located at the back of your brain, is one of the areas most sensitive to reduced blood flow. When blood pressure drops, your peripheral vision often darkens first, creating that tunnel vision effect. In more severe cases, your vision might black out completely for a moment. The lightheadedness and dizziness occur because your brain's balance centers, particularly the cerebellum and the vestibular system in your inner ear, also depend on steady blood flow. When that flow is disrupted, even briefly, your sense of balance and spatial orientation becomes unreliable. The room might seem to spin, or you might feel like you're swaying when you're actually standing still. Your legs might feel weak or unsteady, as if they can't quite support your weight properly. Some people experience a brief sense of confusion or disorientation. Thoughts become fuzzy for a moment. You might forget what you stood up to do. This cognitive disruption is your frontal cortex, the area responsible for planning and decision-making, temporarily functioning on reduced oxygen. It's subtle and short-lived, but noticeable if you pay attention. In rare cases, if the blood pressure drop is severe enough, or if the compensatory response is particularly delayed, you might actually faint. This is called syncope, and it's your body's emergency response to protect your brain. When you're standing and blood flow to your brain is inadequate, fainting makes you fall to the ground. Once you're horizontal, blood can flow easily to your brain again, and you regain consciousness within seconds. Fainting feels dramatic and frightening, but it's actually a protective mechanism, your body forcing itself into a position where blood flow to the brain is restored. Most people never reach the point of fainting from orthostatic hypotension. The symptoms, the tunnel vision, the dizziness, serve as warnings. Your body is telling you to slow down, to sit back down if needed, to give your cardiovascular system time to catch up. And most people instinctively do this. They grab onto something, steady themselves, and wait for the sensation to pass. Within 5 to 10 seconds, blood pressure normalizes, symptoms resolve, and everything returns to normal. Certain factors make orthostatic hypotension more likely. Dehydration is a major one. When you're dehydrated, your blood volume is reduced. There's literally less blood available to pump to your brain. This means the initial drop in blood pressure when you stand is more pronounced, and your heart has to work harder to compensate. This is why orthostatic hypotension is more common in the morning after a night of sleep, during which you haven't consumed any fluids for hours. Medications can affect orthostatic responses as well. Blood pressure medications, diuretics, certain antidepressants, and medications for Parkinson's disease can all interfere with the body's ability to regulate blood pressure during position changes. If you're taking any of these medications and experiencing frequent dizziness when standing, it's worth discussing with your doctor. Prolonged bed rest or inactivity weakens the cardiovascular system's ability to respond to position changes. When you lie in bed for extended periods, whether due to illness or just a lazy weekend, your blood vessels become accustomed to not having to work against gravity. They lose some of their tone, their ability to constrict quickly and forcefully. When you finally do stand up, they're slow to respond, and dizziness is more likely. Hot environments exacerbate the problem. When you're hot, your blood vessels dilate to help dissipate heat through your skin. This dilation means blood pressure is already somewhat lower than normal. If you then stand up quickly, the additional drop from blood pooling in your legs can push you past the threshold where symptoms appear. This is why people sometimes feel faint after hot showers or baths, or when standing up quickly on a hot day. Age plays a role too. As you get older, baroreceptor sensitivity decreases. The sensors don't respond as quickly or as strongly to blood pressure changes. The blood vessels themselves become less elastic, less able to constrict rapidly, and the overall efficiency of the cardiovascular system declines. This is why orthostatic hypotension becomes more common and more pronounced with age. For most people, occasional orthostatic hypotension is nothing to worry about. It's a benign quirk of physiology, a temporary mismatch between your body's position and its circulatory adjustments. It doesn't cause any lasting harm. Your brain receives slightly less blood for a few seconds, but then flow is restored, and there are no consequences. However, frequent or severe episodes warrant medical attention. If you're experiencing dizziness every time you stand, if you're actually fainting, or if the episodes are accompanied by chest pain, shortness of breath, or other concerning symptoms, these could indicate underlying cardiovascular problems, anemia, or autonomic nervous system disorders that need evaluation and treatment. Preventing orthostatic hypotension is mostly about common sense adjustments. When you've been lying down, sit up first before standing. Give your body a few seconds in the seated position to begin adjusting. When you do stand, do it slowly rather than jumping up abruptly. Stay well hydrated, especially in the morning and during hot weather. If you know certain medications make you prone to dizziness, be extra cautious when changing positions. Some people find that tensing their leg and abdominal muscles before standing helps. This muscle contraction squeezes blood vessels and helps push blood upward, essentially giving your cardiovascular system a head start on the adjustments it needs to make. Others benefit from compression stockings, which prevent excessive blood pooling in the legs. The most important thing is to recognize orthostatic hypotension for what it is: a temporary, harmless adjustment period. Your body is simply taking a moment to adapt to a new position. Your cardiovascular system, remarkably sophisticated but not instantaneous, is catching up to the demands you've placed on it. The dizziness is a signal that this process is underway, not a sign that something is seriously wrong. Within seconds, balance is restored, vision clears, and you can continue with whatever you stood up to do in the first place. But while dizziness from standing is brief and explainable, there's another type of sudden pain that appears without warning and vanishes just as mysteriously. You're sitting quietly, watching something or reading, when suddenly a sharp pain strikes your chest. It's intense, stabbing, localized to one specific spot, just to the left of your sternum. The pain is so sharp and unexpected that you gasp, your hand instinctively flying to your chest. Your first thought is immediate and terrifying: heart attack. You freeze, afraid to move, afraid to breathe deeply, waiting to see if the pain worsens or if other symptoms appear. But then, just as suddenly as it arrived, the pain begins to fade. Within seconds or maybe a minute, it's completely gone. No lingering discomfort, no other symptoms. Just that brief, intense stab of pain that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as mysteriously. This experience is called precordial catch syndrome, and despite its frightening intensity, it's completely harmless. The term precordial refers to the area in front of your heart, and catch describes the sharp, catching sensation that characterizes the pain. It typically affects children, adolescents, and young adults, though it can occur at any age. The pain is always sharp, always brief, and almost always located in the same area, the left side of the chest near the ribs. What makes precordial catch syndrome so alarming is its suddenness and location. Chest pain automatically triggers fear because we associate it with heart problems. The pain appears without warning, often when you're at rest or engaged in quiet activities. There's no clear trigger, no injury, no apparent cause. One moment you're fine, and the next moment you're experiencing what feels like a serious medical emergency. The exact cause of precordial catch syndrome isn't completely understood, but the leading theory involves the nerves between your ribs. Your rib cage is held together by intercostal muscles, layers of muscle that run between each rib. These muscles help with breathing, expanding and contracting your chest with each breath. Between these muscles run intercostal nerves, branches of nerves that emerge from your spinal cord and wrap around your torso. Sometimes, one of these intercostal nerves, or the pleura, the thin membrane that covers your lungs and lines the inside of your chest cavity, becomes irritated or pinched. This might happen if you're in an unusual position, if you've been sitting hunched over for a while, or simply from a random muscle twitch or spasm. When the nerve is irritated, it sends a sharp pain signal to your brain. Because the nerve is located near your heart, your brain interprets the pain as coming from that general area, even though it's actually originating from the chest wall itself. The pain of precordial catch syndrome has distinctive characteristics. It's always sharp and stabbing, never dull or aching. It's highly localized, usually to a spot you could cover with 1 or 2 fingers. The pain is worse when you breathe in, which is why many people describe it as a catch. You try to take a deep breath, and the pain intensifies dramatically, forcing you to take shallow breaths until it resolves. This breathing-related component is actually a clue that the pain is musculoskeletal rather than cardiac. Heart pain typically doesn't change with breathing. The duration is another distinguishing feature. Precordial catch syndrome lasts from a few seconds to a few minutes, rarely longer than 3 minutes. It reaches peak intensity quickly and then gradually fades. There's no crescendo pattern where it builds over time, and there's no lingering pain after it resolves. Once it's gone, it's completely gone, as if it never happened. This transient nature is reassuring once you know what it is, though it does nothing to reduce the fear during the actual episode. Some people find that taking a very deep breath, pushing through the pain, seems to resolve the episode more quickly. It's as if the deep breath stretches or releases whatever nerve or tissue was pinched, allowing it to return to its normal position. Others find that changing position, sitting up straighter or leaning forward, helps the pain dissipate. And some people simply wait it out, breathing shallowly until the pain fades on its own. Precordial catch syndrome is more common during periods of rapid growth in adolescence, possibly because bones, muscles, and connective tissues are all growing at different rates. creating temporary structural stresses. It's also more common during periods of stress or fatigue, though the reasons for this aren't entirely clear. Stress might increase muscle tension, making nerve irritation more likely. Or it might simply be that when you're stressed and fatigued, your posture deteriorates, creating positions that put more strain on chest wall structures. What precordial catch syndrome is not, and this is crucial, is anything related to your heart. Your heart is functioning normally. There's no blockage in your coronary arteries, no heart attack, no arrhythmia, no structural heart problem. The pain is purely musculoskeletal, originating from the chest wall, not from the heart itself. This distinction is critical because chest pain naturally triggers fear of cardiac problems, and that fear can escalate into panic, which creates its own set of symptoms that can be confused with heart issues. Still, it's important to know when chest pain does warrant immediate medical attention. Heart attack pain typically feels different from precordial catch syndrome. It's usually described as pressure, squeezing, or heaviness rather than sharp stabbing. It often radiates to the jaw, neck, shoulder, or arm. It's accompanied by other symptoms like shortness of breath, sweating, nausea, or a sense of impending doom. And it doesn't go away quickly. It persists and often worsens over time. If you're experiencing chest pain and you're not sure whether it's precordial catch syndrome or something more serious, err on the side of caution. Sharp chest pain in a young, otherwise healthy person that resolves within minutes and doesn't recur is likely benign. But chest pain that's persistent, that comes with other symptoms, or that occurs in someone with risk factors for heart disease should always be evaluated immediately. Beyond precordial catch syndrome, there are other types of transient, random pains that your body produces for no apparent reason. You might feel a sudden, sharp pain in your abdomen that vanishes within seconds. A stabbing sensation in your leg or arm that appears and disappears. A brief, intense pain in your back or neck. Many of these random pains likely originate from temporary nerve irritation, muscle spasms, or fasciculations. Your body is constantly in motion, even when you think you're sitting still. Muscles make tiny adjustments, joints shift minutely, nerves slide through narrow spaces between bones and tissues. Most of the time, these movements happen smoothly and without pain. But occasionally, something catches, pinches, or irritates, creating a brief burst of pain that resolves as soon as the tissue returns to its normal position. These transient pains can be particularly noticeable at night when you're trying to sleep. During the day, you're distracted by activities, and minor pains often go unnoticed or are immediately forgotten. But at night, lying still in a quiet room, any unusual sensation becomes amplified. A random, sharp pain in your side, even if it lasts only seconds, can jolt you awake and trigger anxiety that keeps you from falling back asleep. The fear response to these pains is understandable. Pain is your body's alarm system, designed to alert you to injury or disease. When you feel sudden, sharp pain, especially in areas associated with vital organs like your chest or abdomen, your brain immediately assumes there's a threat. Adrenaline releases, your heart rate increases, you become hyper-alert, scanning for additional symptoms that might indicate a serious problem. But most of the time, particularly in young, healthy individuals, these random pains are just noise. They're false alarms from an overly sensitive detection system. Your body is erring on the side of caution, alerting you to sensations that might be significant but usually aren't. The pain receptors in your chest wall, abdomen, and throughout your body are constantly monitoring for signs of damage. When they detect something even slightly unusual, they report it. Your brain then has to decide whether the signal represents a real threat or just random static. Learning to distinguish between meaningful pain and random transient pain takes experience and often requires medical reassurance. If you've had precordial catch syndrome multiple times and each time it resolved quickly without complications, you learn to recognize it. The fear response becomes less intense. You might still feel a moment of concern when the pain strikes, but you're able to remind yourself that this is probably just that benign chest pain again, and you breathe through it without panicking. The challenge is that anxiety itself can produce chest pain. Muscle tension from stress can cause aching in the chest wall. Hyperventilation can create sharp pains as your chest muscles work harder than necessary. And the hyper-awareness that comes with health anxiety makes you notice sensations that others would ignore completely. This creates diagnostic confusion. Is the chest pain causing the anxiety, or is the anxiety causing the chest pain? Often, it's both, feeding into each other in a loop. Breaking this loop requires a combination of medical reassurance, self-awareness, and cognitive reframing. If you've been evaluated and your heart is healthy, you can learn to reinterpret chest pains through that lens. Instead of thinking heart attack, you can think muscle spasm or nerve irritation or probably nothing serious. This reframing doesn't eliminate the pain, but it reduces the fear response, which reduces stress, which can actually reduce the frequency of pain over time. So the next time you feel that sudden, sharp stab in your chest, that momentary pain that makes you freeze and wonder if something is terribly wrong, take a breath, shallow at first if deep breathing hurts. Notice the characteristics of the pain. Is it sharp and localized? Does it change with breathing? Does it start to fade after a minute or two? If yes, you're likely experiencing precordial catch syndrome or another benign musculoskeletal pain. Your heart is fine. Your body simply sent a false alarm, a sharp signal about a minor irritation that poses no real danger. And just like all the other false alarms we've explored tonight, this one will fade, leaving you unharmed and free to continue your evening. But speaking of your body creating discomfort that seems to come from nowhere, there's one more phantom sensation worth understanding, one that affects your digestive system without any digestive cause. You haven't eaten anything unusual. Your last meal was hours ago and caused no problems, but suddenly, without warning, you feel nauseated. Not mildly queasy, genuinely, intensely nauseated, as if you might actually be sick. Your mouth fills with saliva. Your stomach feels unsettled, churning. You sit very still, afraid that any movement will tip you over the edge. You scan your memory, trying to figure out what you ate that might have caused this, but there's nothing. No food poisoning, no stomach virus, no logical explanation. And then, just as mysteriously as it appeared, the nausea begins to fade. Within minutes, you feel completely normal again, left wondering what just happened. This is functional nausea, sometimes called psychogenic nausea, and it's far more common than most people realize. The term functional means that the sensation is real, but there's no structural or biochemical abnormality causing it. Your stomach isn't actually upset. There's no toxin to expel, no virus to fight. The nausea is being generated by your nervous system, specifically by the intricate communication network between your brain and your gut, often called the gut-brain axis. To understand how your body can create nausea without any digestive cause, you need to understand what nausea actually is and why it exists. Nausea is a protective mechanism, an early warning system designed to prevent you from ingesting or to help you expel something harmful. When your digestive system detects something potentially toxic, whether spoiled food, bacterial toxins, or other harmful substances, it triggers nausea as a first-line defense. The unpleasant sensation discourages you from eating more and prepares your body to vomit if necessary. The sensation of nausea is coordinated by an area in your brainstem called the chemoreceptor trigger zone. This region receives signals from multiple sources, your stomach and intestines, which can detect irritating substances and send signals via the vagus nerve, your inner ear, which is why motion sickness causes nausea, your bloodstream, which is constantly monitored for toxins, drugs, and metabolic abnormalities, and crucially, your higher brain centers, the areas involved in emotion, memory, and stress processing. This last pathway is where functional nausea originates. Your emotional state, your stress levels, your anxiety, all of these can directly trigger nausea without any digestive involvement. The connection makes evolutionary sense. In dangerous or stressful situations, digestion becomes a low priority. Your body needs to focus resources on immediate survival, on fight or flight, not on breaking down your last meal. So stress signals from your brain can inhibit digestive function and trigger nausea, essentially telling your body not to eat right now. We have more urgent concerns. The vagus nerve is the main communication highway between your brain and your gut. It's the longest cranial nerve in your body, wandering, which is what vagus means, from your brainstem down through your neck, chest, and abdomen, sending branches to your heart, lungs, and digestive organs. About 80% of the fibers in the vagus nerve carry information from your gut to your brain, not the other way around. Your gut is constantly sending status reports upward, and your brain is constantly sending regulatory signals downward. When you're anxious or stressed, your brain sends signals down the vagus nerve that alter digestive function. Your stomach's normal churning and mixing movements, called peristalsis, can slow down or become irregular. The production of digestive enzymes and acid can change, and the sensitivity of your stomach lining to its own contents can increase. All of these changes can trigger the sensation of nausea, even though nothing is actually wrong with your digestive system. Some people are particularly prone to stress-induced nausea. If you have a sensitive gut or a history of digestive issues, your vagus nerve communication might be more reactive. Small changes in stress levels can trigger significant digestive sensations, and once you've experienced stress-induced nausea a few times, you can develop anticipatory anxiety about it happening again, which creates more stress, which makes nausea more likely. Another self-perpetuating cycle. The timing of functional nausea can be revealing. Many people experience it in specific situations. Before important events like exams, presentations, or social gatherings, during conflicts or emotionally charged conversations, or late at night when they're trying to sleep and their mind won't quiet down. The common thread is elevated stress or anxiety, even if you're not consciously aware of feeling stressed in the moment. Nighttime nausea, in particular, can be deeply disruptive to sleep. You're lying in bed, trying to relax, when nausea appears. The sensation makes it impossible to get comfortable. You might feel like you need to sit up, go to the bathroom, or eat something to settle your stomach. But these actions rarely help because the nausea isn't coming from your stomach. It's coming from your brain's stress response, and no amount of antacids or crackers will address that root cause. The nausea can trigger significant anxiety on its own. Vomiting is deeply unpleasant, and the fear of being sick, especially at night or in situations where it would be embarrassing or inconvenient, creates intense distress. This fear activates your stress response even more, releasing more adrenaline, which increases the nausea, which increases the fear. You end up lying in bed with your stomach churning, afraid to move, afraid to sleep, because you're not sure what will happen if you relax your vigilance. Certain thought patterns can trigger or worsen functional nausea. Thinking about food, particularly foods you associate with previous nausea or illness, can create a conditioned response. Your brain, remembering the association between that food and feeling sick, preemptively triggers nausea to protect you. Similarly, thinking about situations where you felt nauseated before, or worrying about whether you might feel nauseated, can be enough to actually trigger the sensation. Your brain, trying to prepare you for a potential threat, accidentally creates the very problem it's trying to avoid. Memory plays a powerful role in nausea. If you once felt sick after eating a particular food, even if that sickness was unrelated to the food itself, your brain might create an aversion. Years later, just the smell or thought of that food can trigger nausea. This is called taste aversion, and it's one of the strongest forms of learned behavior in mammals. It evolved to help us avoid poisonous foods, but it can also create irrational nausea responses to perfectly safe foods that happen to be eaten before an unrelated illness. Hormonal fluctuations can contribute to functional nausea as well, particularly in women. Changes in estrogen and progesterone levels throughout the menstrual cycle affect the gut-brain axis. Some women experience nausea at specific points in their cycle, even without any digestive issue. Pregnancy-related nausea, while often assumed to be purely hormonal, also has a significant stress and sensitivity component. The hormonal changes make the nervous system more reactive, and stress amplifies the nausea. Blood sugar fluctuations are another factor. When blood sugar drops too low, which can happen if you've gone many hours without eating or if you've consumed a lot of simple carbohydrates followed by an insulin spike, it can trigger nausea. Low blood sugar activates your stress response as your body tries to mobilize energy reserves. This stress response, in turn, can cause nausea through the mechanisms we've already discussed. Eating small, frequent meals with protein and complex carbohydrates can help stabilize blood sugar and reduce this type of nausea. Treating functional nausea requires addressing the underlying nervous system sensitivity rather than treating the stomach itself. Anti-nausea medications can provide temporary relief, but they're not addressing the root cause. The most effective approaches focus on calming the stress response and improving gut-brain communication. Deep breathing exercises can be remarkably effective. Slow, diaphragmatic breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode that counteracts the stress response. When you breathe slowly and deeply, you're sending signals through the vagus nerve that tell your gut to relax. This can reduce nausea within minutes. The technique is simple. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 6 or 7. The longer exhale is key, as it maximizes parasympathetic activation. Distraction can help break the nausea-anxiety cycle. When you focus intently on the nausea, monitoring it constantly, you're essentially amplifying the signal. Your brain interprets your focused attention as confirmation that this sensation is important and threatening, which makes it more prominent. Redirecting your attention to something else, a podcast, a conversation, a simple task, can allow the nausea to fade into the background. Certain physical sensations can reduce nausea. Cold can be helpful. Holding a cool cloth to your forehead or the back of your neck, sipping ice water, or even just breathing cool air can provide relief. Acupressure at the P6 point, located on the inside of your wrist about 3 finger widths below the base of your palm, has been shown in studies to reduce nausea. Gentle pressure or a specialized wristband that applies constant pressure to this point can be effective for some people. Cognitive behavioral approaches help address the thought patterns that perpetuate functional nausea. If you find yourself catastrophizing, imagining that you're about to be violently ill based on a mild sensation of queasiness, you can learn to challenge those thoughts. Remind yourself that you've felt this way before and nothing bad happened. The nausea is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. It will pass. This cognitive reframing doesn't eliminate the sensation immediately, but it reduces the anxiety that amplifies it. Understanding that functional nausea is a false alarm from your nervous system, not a signal of actual digestive distress, can be profoundly reassuring. Your body is responding to stress or sensitivity by triggering a protective mechanism that isn't actually needed in this moment. There's no toxin to expel, no virus to fight. Just an overactive stress response, creating sensations that feel physical but originate in your nervous system. So tonight, if you're lying in bed and nausea appears without explanation, without any logical cause, recognize it for what it is. It's your gut-brain axis misfiring, it's stress or anxiety or nervous system sensitivity manifesting as a digestive sensation. It's uncomfortable and distracting, but it's not dangerous. Take some slow, deep breaths. Shift your focus away from the sensation. Remind yourself that this is temporary and that your body is simply being overly cautious, sounding an alarm for a threat that doesn't exist. And as we've seen throughout this journey, that's what your body does best, protecting you with such enthusiasm that it sometimes creates the very discomfort it's trying to prevent. We've spent this entire journey exploring the false alarms your body creates, the phantom sensations, the misinterpreted signals, the overreactions to harmless stimuli. And now we arrive at perhaps the most meta false alarm of all, the one where your awareness of your body itself becomes the threat. This is health anxiety, the exhausting state of hypervigilance, where every sensation, every twitch, every irregular heartbeat becomes potential evidence of serious illness. It's your body's threat detection system turning inward, scanning constantly for signs of danger and finding them everywhere, even when everything is actually fine. Health anxiety exists on a spectrum. At its mildest, it's that moment of concern when you notice an unusual sensation and briefly wonder if something might be wrong. This is normal, adaptive even. Your body should alert you to changes, and you should pay attention to persistent or severe symptoms. But at the other end of the spectrum is a state of constant monitoring and worry, where you're perpetually convinced that catastrophe is lurking inside your own body, just waiting to reveal itself. The irony is that health anxiety creates many of the very symptoms it fears. When you're anxious, your body activates its stress response. Your heart rate increases, your breathing changes, muscles tense, digestion slows, blood flow is redirected. All of these physiological changes create sensations: a racing heart, shortness of breath, chest tightness, stomach discomfort, dizziness. And when you're already primed to interpret bodily sensations as signs of illness, these stress-induced symptoms become evidence that confirms your worst fears. This creates a vicious cycle that's difficult to break. You notice a sensation, perhaps a skipped heartbeat, You become worried that it might indicate a heart problem. This worry triggers anxiety, which releases adrenaline, which makes your heart race and skip more beats. Now you have more symptoms to worry about, which increases your anxiety further, which creates even more physical sensations. The cycle feeds itself, with each element reinforcing the others. One of the hallmarks of health anxiety is a phenomenon called interoceptive awareness. Interoception is your ability to perceive internal bodily sensations, things like your heartbeat, breathing, digestion, and other automatic processes. Most people have a moderate level of interoceptive awareness. They notice bodily sensations when they're significant, but largely ignore the constant background noise of normal physiological function. But in health anxiety, interoceptive awareness becomes heightened to an uncomfortable degree. You become hyper-aware of your internal state. You notice every flutter of your heart, every shift in your breathing pattern, every gurgle in your stomach. Sensations that most people would never consciously register become impossible for you to ignore. And because you're noticing these sensations, you assume they must be significant. Normal bodily processes that have been happening your entire life suddenly seem abnormal simply because you're paying attention to them. This hyper-awareness is exhausting, particularly at night when you're trying to sleep. During the day, external stimuli provide distraction. Your attention is directed outward toward work, conversations, activities, but when you lie down in a dark, quiet room, there's nothing to distract you. Your attention naturally turns inward, and if you're prone to health anxiety, this inward focus becomes a problem. Every sensation becomes magnified. Your heartbeat seems louder, your breathing feels more labored. Random twitches and tingles that occur constantly throughout the day suddenly seem ominous. The hypervigilance prevents your nervous system from settling into the relaxed state necessary for sleep. Part of your mind remains on guard, constantly monitoring for signs that something is wrong. This monitoring keeps your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, partially activated. Your heart rate stays slightly elevated. Your muscles maintain some tension, stress hormones remain in your bloodstream, and sleep, which requires a shift to parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest mode, becomes elusive. Medical student syndrome is a well-documented phenomenon that illustrates how knowledge and attention can create perceived symptoms. Medical students, as they learn about various diseases and their symptoms, often become convinced they're experiencing those symptoms themselves. They read about a rare neurological disorder and suddenly notice twitching. They learn about cardiac arrhythmias and become hyper-aware of their heartbeat. The symptoms they're experiencing are often real sensations, normal variations in bodily function that everyone experiences. But their newfound knowledge and focused attention transform these benign sensations into potential signs of serious illness. The internet has amplified this phenomenon exponentially. You can now research any symptom instantly and within minutes find articles describing rare, serious conditions that might cause it. The problem is that these articles rarely mention how common, benign explanations are. They don't emphasize that muscle twitching is usually just fatigue, that skipped heartbeats are almost always harmless, or that random pains typically resolve on their own without intervention. This creates a selection bias in your research. You're looking for what might be wrong, so you find information about things that can go wrong. You're not finding reassuring statistics about how common and harmless these sensations usually are. And the more you read, the more symptoms you discover that you might have. Suddenly, you're not just worried about one symptom, you're worried about 10, each one potentially indicating a different, serious condition. Reassurance seeking is a common behavior in health anxiety, but paradoxically, it often makes things worse. You might check your pulse repeatedly, confirming that your heart is still beating regularly. You might examine your skin for changes, looking for any sign of something abnormal. You might seek medical opinions, hoping that tests will prove everything is fine. And initially, reassurance does provide relief. The doctor says your heart is healthy. The tests come back normal. For a moment, you feel better. But the relief is short-lived. Within hours or days, doubt creeps back in. Maybe the doctor missed something. Maybe the tests weren't comprehensive enough. Maybe that normal result was a fluke, and if you were tested again now, it would show something different. So you seek more reassurance, more tests, more opinions. But each round of reassurance provides diminishing returns, and the need for reassurance grows stronger. You become trapped in a cycle where the very behaviors meant to reduce anxiety actually perpetuate it. Body checking is another compulsive behavior that maintains health anxiety. You constantly monitor your body for changes. You palpate areas, looking for lumps. You check your skin for new marks or discolorations. You take your pulse, your temperature, your blood pressure. Each check is motivated by the belief that early detection will protect you. But what actually happens is that the constant checking keeps your attention focused on your body, and the more attention you pay, the more sensations you notice, and the more worried you become. The underlying mechanism driving all of this is an intolerance of uncertainty. The human mind craves certainty, especially regarding our health and survival. But absolute certainty is impossible. You can never be completely, 100% certain that nothing is wrong with your body. There's always a tiny possibility, however remote, that something could be developing that hasn't been detected yet. Most people can accept this uncertainty and live with it comfortably. But in health anxiety, this uncertainty becomes intolerable. You seek absolute proof that you're healthy, but no amount of testing can provide that proof. A normal test result tells you that nothing was detected at that specific moment using that specific test. It doesn't guarantee that nothing will ever be wrong in the future. It doesn't eliminate all possibility of illness. So the uncertainty remains, and the anxiety continues, driving you to seek more reassurance that can never fully satisfy the need for certainty. Breaking free from health anxiety requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to bodily sensations and uncertainty. Instead of treating every sensation as a potential warning sign that must be investigated, you learn to acknowledge sensations without reacting to them. This doesn't mean ignoring genuine symptoms that warrant medical attention. It means developing the ability to distinguish between sensations that are likely benign and those that genuinely merit concern. Cognitive behavioral therapy has strong evidence for treating health anxiety. It helps you identify and challenge the thought patterns that perpetuate worry. When you notice a symptom and immediately think this could be serious illness, you learn to question that thought. What's the evidence for this belief? What's a more likely explanation? Have I experienced this sensation before without it being serious? This cognitive work doesn't eliminate the sensations, but it changes how you interpret them. Exposure and response prevention, a component of CBT, involves gradually exposing yourself to the uncertainty you fear while preventing the compulsive behaviors like checking and reassurance seeking that temporarily reduce anxiety. You might practice noticing a bodily sensation and deliberately not checking it or researching it. Initially, this creates significant discomfort, but over time your nervous system learns that these sensations aren't actually dangerous, and the anxiety response diminishes. Mindfulness practices can help create distance between you and your bodily sensations. Instead of identifying with every sensation, you observe them with curiosity rather than judgment. You notice that you're experiencing chest tightness without immediately concluding that something is wrong. You acknowledge the sensation, recognize that it's uncomfortable, and allow it to be present without trying to fix it or figure out what it means. This acceptance-based approach reduces the amplification that comes from fighting or fearing the sensations. Understanding that your body constantly produces random, benign sensations can be profoundly liberating. Your heart occasionally skips beats, your muscles twitch, pains appear and disappear. Your digestion makes noises and sensations. All of this is normal. It's been happening your entire life. The only thing that's changed is that now you're paying attention to it, and that attention has transformed background noise into foreground alarm. So, as we come to the end of this exploration of your body's false alarms, remember that health anxiety is perhaps the ultimate false alarm, the one where your protective instincts become so sensitive that they create the very distress they're meant to prevent. Your body isn't trying to deceive you. It's trying to protect you. But sometimes protection becomes overprotection and vigilance becomes hypervigilance, and what should be helpful becomes harmful. Learning to trust that your body generally knows what it's doing, that most sensations are benign, and that uncertainty is a natural part of existence, this is the path toward peace with your own physiology. We've journeyed through 15 different ways your body creates false alarms. 15 sensations that feel dangerous but aren't. 15 times your survival instincts misread normal signals as threats. And now, as we near the end, it's worth stepping back to see the larger pattern. Your body, this remarkable biological machine that keeps you alive every single day, has a fundamental operating principle. When in doubt, assume danger. Better to overreact to 100 harmless stimuli than to underreact to one genuine threat. This strategy kept your ancestors alive. But in the modern world, where actual physical threats are rare, it means you spend a lot of time responding to alarms that don't signify real danger. Think about what we've covered. Your brain jolts you awake with the sensation of falling when you're perfectly safe in bed. Your diaphragm spasms violently over nothing. You sneeze at hurricane force to expel a speck of dust. Your heart skips a beat and your body treats it like a cardiac emergency. You hear ringing that doesn't exist. Your mouth burns when nothing is burning it. Your throat feels blocked when nothing is blocking it. Your eyelid twitches and won't stop. Your limbs fall asleep from simple pressure. You feel like you can't breathe when your oxygen levels are perfect. You itch for no reason. You get dizzy from standing. You experience sharp chest pains that vanish as mysteriously as they arrived. You feel nauseated without any digestive cause. And you become hyper-aware of every bodily sensation, convinced that catastrophe is lurking inside you. Every single one of these experiences has the same root cause. Your nervous system is being overly cautious. It's detecting minor variations in normal function and interpreting them as potential threats. It's sounding alarms with enthusiasm and commitment, even when there's no fire. And you, caught in the middle, have to live with a body that sometimes seems convinced it's dying when it's actually functioning perfectly well. This isn't a design flaw, it's a design feature. From an evolutionary perspective, false alarms are cheap. If your ancestor heard a rustling in the bushes and assumed it was a predator when it was actually just wind, the cost was minimal. Maybe some wasted energy, a brief spike in stress hormones, a moment of unnecessary fear. But if they heard rustling and assumed it was wind when it was actually a predator, the cost was death. Natural selection doesn't favor calm, rational assessment of ambiguous signals. It favors hair-trigger responses that keep you alive. Your body has inherited this hair-trigger sensitivity. The problem is that the threats have changed, but the alarm system hasn't. Your ancestors needed to be alert for predators, poisonous foods, infections, injuries, immediate physical dangers that could kill them within minutes or hours. Your modern life rarely presents these kinds of threats. You're not being chased by predators. Your food is generally safe. Minor infections are treatable. Physical injuries are uncommon. But your alarm system doesn't know this. It's still calibrated for a world where danger was constant and immediate. So it responds to modern stimuli, stress, caffeine, lack of sleep, poor posture, anxiety, with the same intensity it would respond to genuine threats. A looming work deadline triggers the same fight or flight response as a charging animal would have. Social anxiety activates the same alarm systems as physical danger. Your body can't distinguish between I might embarrass myself in this presentation and I might be eaten by a predator. Both scenarios trigger the release of stress hormones, the increase in heart rate, the redirection of blood flow, the whole cascade of physiological changes meant to prepare you for immediate physical action. And these physiological changes create sensations, lots of them. Your heart pounds, your breathing quickens, your muscles tense, your digestion slows, blood flow shifts away from your extremities toward your core. All of this is meant to help you fight or flee. But when there's no physical threat to fight or flee from, these sensations just sit there, uncomfortable and alarming, with nowhere to go. The modern addition to this ancient system is information overload. You have access to more medical information than any generation in human history. You can research symptoms instantly. You can read about rare diseases. You can find forums where people discuss their health anxieties in exhaustive detail. This access to information should, in theory, be reassuring. Knowledge is power, after all, but in practice, it often amplifies anxiety. You notice a symptom, and within minutes you're reading about worst-case scenarios. You learn about rare conditions you'd never heard of before, and suddenly you're wondering if you might have them. The algorithms that govern online content know that health-related searches indicate anxiety, and anxiety drives engagement, so they serve you more alarming content. You end up in a spiral of information that confirms your fears rather than alleviating them. Social media adds another layer. You see others posting about their health struggles, their diagnoses, their symptoms. This creates a kind of symptom contagion. You read about someone experiencing a particular sensation and suddenly you notice it in yourself. Not because you didn't have it before, but because reading about it brought it into your conscious awareness. And once you're aware of it, it's hard to ignore. The isolation of modern life doesn't help either. Your ancestors lived in close-knit communities where health concerns could be normalized through social comparison. If everyone in your tribe occasionally experienced heart palpitations or random aches, you'd know it was common and probably harmless. But now, you experience these sensations alone, at night, in the dark, with no immediate frame of reference for whether what you're feeling is normal or dangerous. Sleep deprivation, endemic in modern society, makes everything worse. When you're tired, your nervous system becomes more reactive. Sensations feel more intense. Your ability to regulate emotions and maintain perspective deteriorates. Things that wouldn't bother you when well rested become overwhelming when you're exhausted. And of course, The anxiety about bodily sensations makes it harder to sleep, and poor sleep makes the sensations worse, and around the cycle goes. So what's the solution? How do you live peacefully with a body that's constantly crying wolf? The answer isn't to ignore all signals from your body. Some warnings are legitimate and need attention. The answer is to develop discernment, the ability to distinguish between signals that warrant concern and those that are just noise. Legitimate warning signs typically have certain characteristics. They're persistent rather than fleeting. They worsen over time rather than fluctuating randomly. They're accompanied by other symptoms that fit a coherent pattern. They interfere significantly with your ability to function, and often, though not always, they're associated with known risk factors or previous medical conditions. False alarms, the kind we've been discussing, have different characteristics. They're transient, appearing and disappearing without clear cause. They improve when you're distracted or relaxed. They don't follow a progressive pattern, and they occur in the absence of other concerning symptoms or risk factors. Learning to recognize these patterns takes time and often requires medical reassurance along the way. You need to know that your heart has been checked and is healthy before you can confidently dismiss palpitations as benign. You need to understand that your chest pain has been evaluated and isn't cardiac before you can recognize it as muscular. This is where working with healthcare providers you trust becomes important, not for constant reassurance seeking, but for establishing a baseline understanding of your health that allows you to interpret symptoms with appropriate context. Once you have that baseline, you can start to observe your body's patterns without immediately catastrophizing. You notice a sensation, and instead of thinking this could be serious disease, you think I've felt this before and it passed without incident. This cognitive reframing doesn't happen overnight. It requires practice, patience, and repeated experiences of noticing symptoms, not reacting with panic, and observing that nothing bad happens. Mindfulness, truly inhabiting your body without judgment, can help you develop a different relationship with bodily sensations. Instead of experiencing a sensation and immediately trying to figure out what's wrong, you simply notice it. You observe that there's tightness in your chest, or a flutter in your stomach, or tingling in your hand. You acknowledge it's there. And then, crucially, you let it be there without trying to fix it, research it, or figure out what it means. Often, when you stop fighting sensations or fearing them, they lose their power over you. Trust is the ultimate goal. Trust that your body, which has kept you alive every moment of every day of your entire life, generally knows what it's doing. Trust that most sensations are benign variations in normal function. Trust that genuine problems usually announce themselves clearly rather than through vague, transient symptoms. And trust that you can tolerate uncertainty, that you don't need absolute proof that everything is fine in order to live your life. Your body is not your enemy. It's trying to protect you. Yes, it's overenthusiastic. Yes, it sounds alarms at the slightest provocation. Yes, it creates sensations that feel alarming when nothing is actually wrong. But all of this comes from a place of deep biological imperative to keep you alive. Your body would rather scare you unnecessarily 1,000 times than fail to warn you once when there's real danger. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, make peace with your overprotective body. Thank it for its vigilance, even when that vigilance is misplaced. Acknowledge the sensations it creates without letting them control you. Recognize the false alarms for what they are, evidence of a system that cares deeply about your survival, even if it's a bit overzealous in its methods. And then, gently, kindly, let those alarms fade into the background where they belong, knowing that you're safe, you're healthy, and your body's dire warnings are almost always just that body, doing what bodies do, being cautious, being protective, and occasionally being wrong. Sleep well. So here we are. You've made it through the entire catalogue of your body's false alarms. 15 different ways your survival instincts misfire. 15 sensations that feel like emergencies but aren't. 15 times your body has convinced you that something is trying to kill you when the only real threat is your own overactive nervous system. And if you're listening to this as you drift off to sleep, maybe you've recognized yourself in some of these experiences. Maybe you've felt that jolt as you're falling asleep, or that phantom lump in your throat, or that sudden conviction that you can't breathe properly. And maybe, just maybe, understanding what's actually happening inside your body will help you worry a little less the next time it occurs. Let's bring this full circle. Remember where we started. That moment when your body decides you're in danger when you're absolutely not. When you're just sitting there, or lying in bed, or going about your ordinary day, and suddenly your heart races, your palms sweat, your throat tightens, and every alarm system in your biology starts screaming. We've spent this entire journey exploring why that happens. And the answer, in every single case, comes down to the same fundamental principle. Your body is designed to keep you alive, and it takes that job very seriously. So seriously that it would rather create 100 false alarms than miss one genuine threat. This strategy makes perfect evolutionary sense. Your ancestors who jumped at every shadow, who treated every unusual sensation as a potential emergency, who erred on the side of caution, they survived. They passed their genes down through countless generations until those genes reached you. The ancestors who were calm and rational, who carefully evaluated whether that rustling in the bushes was actually dangerous before reacting, well, some of them got eaten. Natural selection didn't favor the contemplative. It favored the reactive. And you've inherited that reactivity, that hair-trigger alarm system that prioritizes survival over comfort. But here's what makes modern life so challenging for this ancient system. The threats have changed, but your body hasn't. You're not facing predators or starvation or the constant physical dangers that shaped your biology. You're facing deadlines, social pressures, information overload, irregular sleep, too much caffeine, not enough movement, chronic, low-level stress that never quite resolves. And your body, not knowing the difference between a presentation at work and a charging predator, responds to all of it with the same intensity. Every false alarm we've discussed tonight is your body applying ancient solutions to modern problems. Your brain jolts you awake because millions of years ago, relaxing your grip on a tree branch could have been fatal. Your heart skips a beat and your body panics because cardiovascular irregularities could signal danger. You feel like you can't breathe because changes in breathing patterns might indicate a threat. Your skin itches without cause because your immune system is on high alert, scanning for parasites or toxins. All of these responses made sense in the environment where they evolved. They just don't make as much sense now. The cruel irony is that the stress of modern life makes these false alarms more frequent and more intense. When you're chronically stressed, sleep-deprived, over-caffeinated, and anxious, your nervous system exists in a state of heightened reactivity. Your threat detection threshold lowers. Sensations that would normally be filtered out as background noise suddenly register as potential dangers. Your body becomes hypersensitive, interpreting normal variations in function as signs that something is wrong. And nowhere is this more disruptive than when you're trying to sleep. Sleep requires letting go. It requires trusting that you're safe enough to become unconscious and vulnerable. It requires your nervous system to shift from sympathetic dominance, the alert, vigilant fight or flight mode, to parasympathetic dominance, the relaxed, restorative rest and digest mode. But if your body is convinced that threats are lurking, if it's constantly scanning for danger and finding false alarms everywhere, that shift can't happen. You lie there, exhausted but unable to sleep, because part of your brain refuses to lower its guard. During the day, you're distracted by work, conversation, movement, the constant sensory input of waking life. But at night, there's nothing to occupy your attention except your own body. And when you turn your attention inward, you discover that your body is always doing something. Your heart beats with slight variations in rhythm. Your breathing shifts and adjusts. Your muscles twitch and relax. Your digestive system gurgles and churns. Your skin tingles and itches. All of this is completely normal. It's been happening your entire life. But now, in the silence, you notice it. And noticing it makes it seem significant. And significance triggers concern. And concern activates your stress response. And suddenly you're wide awake, worried about sensations that are utterly benign. Breaking this cycle requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to your body. Instead of treating every sensation as a potential warning sign that must be investigated and resolved, you learn to acknowledge sensations without reacting to them. You notice that your heart skipped a beat, and instead of panicking, you simply think, "Oh, there's that thing my heart does sometimes." You feel that phantom lump in your throat, and instead of swallowing repeatedly and catastrophizing, you recognize it as muscle tension and let it be. You experience that sudden itch or twitch or tingle, and instead of immediately trying to figure out what's wrong, you observe it with curiosity and then let your attention move on. This doesn't mean ignoring your body or dismissing all symptoms as anxiety. Some sensations do warrant medical attention. Persistent pain, progressive weakness, symptoms that interfere significantly with your life. These should be evaluated by healthcare professionals. But the vast majority of the sensations we've discussed tonight, the transient, stress-related, anxiety-amplified false alarms, these don't need intervention. They need perspective. They need you to understand what they are and what they aren't. They need you to stop fighting them and start allowing them to simply exist without assigning catastrophic meaning to them. Knowledge is power in this context. When you understand that hypnic jerks are harmless remnants of an ancient tree-sleeping reflex, they become less frightening. When you know that PVCs are incredibly common and almost always benign, they lose some of their terror. When you recognize that tinnitus is your brain filling in missing frequencies rather than a sign of impending deafness, it becomes easier to tolerate. When you understand that globus sensation is just muscle tension rather than an actual obstruction, you can stop swallowing compulsively and let it pass. Knowledge transforms mysterious and frightening sensations into understandable biological phenomena, and understanding breeds acceptance. Sleep itself becomes easier when you stop being afraid of your own body, when you can lie down at night without dreading what sensations might appear, when you can notice your heart rate or breathing pattern without immediately spiraling into anxiety, when you can acknowledge that yes, your body sometimes does odd things, and that's okay. That's just how bodies work. This acceptance, this trust, this willingness to coexist peacefully with a body that's occasionally dramatic and overprotective, This is what allows your nervous system to finally relax. And here's what's beautiful about this shift. Once you stop responding to the false alarms with fear and urgency, they often become less frequent and less intense. Your nervous system learns, through repeated experience, that these sensations aren't actually dangerous. The alarm system recalibrates slightly. It doesn't disappear. You'll still have a body that occasionally overreacts, but it becomes less sensitive, less hair trigger, more manageable. Your body is doing its best with the equipment it has. It's trying to protect you using systems that evolved over millions of years in environments vastly different from the one you inhabit now. It doesn't understand that you're safe in your bed, that the stress you're experiencing isn't life-threatening, that most of the sensations it's creating don't signify real danger. It's just being cautious, overly cautious, perhaps. But its intentions are good. It wants to keep you alive. And in that fundamental goal, it succeeds remarkably well, day after day, year after year, usually without you having to think about it at all. So as you lie here tonight, perhaps feeling one or several of the sensations we've discussed, remember that you're not broken, you're not sick, you're not dying, you're just human, with a human body that comes equipped with a very enthusiastic alarm system. Those alarms will sound. They'll probably sound tomorrow and the day after, and periodically for the rest of your life. But now you know what they are. You know they're false. And you know that the appropriate response isn't panic or investigation or compulsive checking. The appropriate response is acknowledgement, understanding, and then gently, kindly letting them fade back into the background where they belong. Before you drift off, I'd love to hear from you. If this helped you understand something about your own body, go ahead and like this video. If you want more content like this to help you relax and learn while you fall asleep, subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, tell me which of these false alarms you experience most often. Are you a hypnic jerk person? Do you get phantom itches that drive you crazy? Does your eyelid twitch when you're stressed? I'm genuinely curious about your experiences, and it helps me know what to explore in future videos. And here's one final thought to take with you into sleep. What if, instead of asking what's wrong with my body, you started asking, what is my body trying to tell me? Because most of the time, the answer isn't that you're sick or broken. The answer is that you're tired, or stressed, or need to move more, or drink more water, or cut back on caffeine, or simply be kinder to yourself. Your body's false alarms are often asking for care, not medical intervention. They're asking you to slow down, to rest, to trust, to let go. And that's something you can give yourself right now, tonight, as you close your eyes and allow sleep to come. You're safe. Your body, dramatic as it sometimes is working exactly as it should, and you can rest. Good night.